Alright, so South Park wrapped up its 2025 season about 2 weeks ago now, and in that time I've done a lot of reflecting on how I feel about this season as a whole, and I'd say overall my feelings are pretty mixed. So what I figured I would do to keep you guys entertained while I work on some other videos is to basically take all 10 episode reviews I made this year and compile them into one video with the sponsors and outros removed. That way if you want to hear my feelings on the season as a whole, you kind of get a whole comprehensive thing here. And at the very end I've added a section where I talk about my current feelings about this season, as well as a quick ranking of every episode of the season from worst to best in my own opinion. So if you've already seen all the other videos, you can go ahead and just skip straight to the end if you want. I'm going to have all the chapters listed in the description, but I am working on a couple of pretty big videos right now, both South Park and non-South Park related, so those will be coming soon, but until then, hopefully you're satisfied with this. So the season 27 premiere of South Park just aired, and holy shit. I think it's safe to say that South Park is back. And when I say that, I don't just mean that the show is literally back. I mean the soul, the edge, the controversy. South Park is back in a way that they haven't been back in probably at least a decade. And if they hadn't made it very clear in the past, I think Matt and Trey just wanted to remind us they truly do not give a single fuck. What they did in this episode is probably the most insane middle finger I have ever seen. And I'm not even talking about what they did to Trump. Sure, they tore Trump to shreds, but not just for the sake of it. No, making fun of Trump was a calculated play on their part to achieve their real goal, screwing Paramount as hard as they can. Like, I don't think you guys understand just how insane this actually is. I'm so excited to talk about it because if you don't know the full context of everything going on behind the scenes, by the end of this video you will, and you'll understand that this might be the most insane thing South Park has ever done, even crazier than the Muhammad and Scientology stuff. This is genuinely some next level 200 IQ supervillain shit on the part of Matt and Trey. So enough of the intro, let's just get straight into it. So I'm going to start with a quick summary of the episode, and then I'll give context as to why this is so crazy, but if you want to just skip to that, feel free to do so with the chapters. The episode opens with Cartman finding out from his mother that his favorite comedy radio show, NPR, has been taken off the air by the president. Of course, this is Cartman, so calling NPR a comedy show is pretty par for the course.
It had like gay rappers from Mexico all sad because girls in Pakistan got stoned to death, and guess why they got stoned to death? Because they were raped! It was hilarious! Why would anyone cancel that?
He begins to notice that the cultural tides seem to be shifting away from woke, and he's afraid of that happening.
Woke stuff is off limits. I mean, it's like now everyone rips on the Jews and it's totally fine, huh, Kyle?
His last hope is PC Principal, the man whose entire character is literally just a representation of woke politics, but he quickly learns that he too is compromised.
Our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ.
What?
Now, I'm not sure if this is referencing a specific event, but I know that this administration has made statements about wanting to put Christianity back into the government and schools, with some states doing things like putting the 10 Commandments in the classroom. So, of course, the way they go about showing this is by having PC Principal bring Jesus himself into the school. So Stan tells Randy this, and he's slightly concerned, so he does what every good parent would do and talks to ChatGPT about it. Back at school, Cartman is freaking out about the fact that even PC Principal isn't woke anymore, and he declares woke to be dead.
You can just stay retarded now, nobody cares. Everyone hates the Jews, everyone's fine with using gay slurs.
Now, you may be wondering, why would Cartman, of all people, care about things being less woke? You would think he would rejoice over that. Well, not exactly, because if no one is woke, Cartman has no one to piss off. Cartman doesn't actually hold any political beliefs at all. All he cares about is using social or political movements for his own enjoyment, and of course there is nothing he enjoys more than antagonizing people. So, if no one's woke anymore, he has nothing to live for. I also feel like this is kind of a meta joke about South Park itself, where Matt and Trey feel like being politically incorrect and offensive was kind of their whole thing. But now that it's seemingly the norm, it's just not the same. They're not special anymore. At the bar, the whole town is talking about the president, and we begin to see the effects of the death of woke firsthand.
I voted for him to get rid of all the woke stuff, but now that retarded faggot is just putting money in his own pockets.
So they all get riled up and decide to take matters into their own hands, forming an angry mob and heading straight to the president's front door. Except when they bust in, they find a scene they didn't expect.
Excuse me, do you mind?
So Garrison is no longer the president. He gave up on that at the end of the last season. And can I just say, thank God. Garrison has always been one of my favorite characters, and him having to play the role of Trump for so long was downright exhausting. I am so glad they found a way to remove him from that role entirely. But if Garrison isn't president, it begs the question.
Who's the retarded faggot in the White House?
We get the answer to this question alongside the return of a familiar face.
A dictator from the Middle East? Hey, relax, guy. I'm just your average Joe. Take a rest.
Now, if you're not a scholar in South Park lore like myself, you may not understand who this is, but that's why I'm here. That, my friends, is Saddam Hussein, and he was an occasionally recurring character from the early seasons of the show. The last time he made a major appearance was 22 years ago back in season 7 when he got caught pretending to be the Prime Minister of Canada. He played a major role in the South Park movie as Satan's lover and a couple of subsequent episodes in the following season. But he is back in all of his glory, this time with a fresh new look. Now, technically, we don't know if this is actually a separate character, just given the exact same voice and mannerisms as Saddam, or if it's Saddam wearing a disguise. I tend to lean towards the latter because he did exactly that in his last appearance, and there's a few lines that hint at it.
Hey, come on. You don't want me to bomb you like I did Iraq.
I thought you just bombed Iran.
Iraq, what the hell's the difference? Relax, guy.
But this is the point when the episode really starts to go off the rails, giving us a completely absurd and Looney Tunes-esque caricature of Trump, who goes down the halls critiquing all of his portraits for his penis being too small. Then he hops into bed with another familiar face we haven't seen in a while.
I can't even see anything, it's so small.
Now, this may seem overly childish even by South Park standards, but there is a very good reason for that, which we'll talk about later in the video. Meanwhile, Cartman has completely given up hope, confiding in Butters at the pond. Without Woke, he has nothing to live for, and despite Butters' pleas, he knows what he has to do.
I'm gonna kill myself. And you.
Back at the White House, Trump is living it up when Randy gives him a call to air the town's grievances. He casually walks past some rather flattering artwork on the wall while they chat, and he ends it by threatening to sue South Park. And Satan has a couple of questions for him when he gets back into bed.
Another random bitch commented on my Instagram that you're on the Epstein list.
Are we still talking about that?
It's weird that whenever it comes up, you just tell everyone to relax. You remind me more and more of this other guy I used to date. Like, a lot. Meanwhile,
Cartman is in Butters' garage attempting to suck down the exhaust from the car, and he eventually convinces Butters to join in. 60 Minutes is very timidly reporting on South Park's protest against Trump, which gives a pretty funny gag.
The Stotch family is proud to say that we own an electric car.
What's funny about this is I actually predicted they would make this joke because they made pretty much this exact same joke back in season 12.
What happened? I thought you were gonna kill yourself.
I tried. Went to sleep in my mom's car in the garage with the engine turned on.
But you didn't die?
Freaking hybrids, man. They just don't do the trick anymore.
So then Jesus comes in to explain to the town what's really going on, and he outright name drops Paramount, CBS, and Stephen Colbert.
You guys saw what happened to CBS? Yeah, well, guess who owns CBS? Paramount. You really want to end up like Colbert? You guys gotta stop being stupid.
And I'll explain all of this in a second. The episode ends with the town agreeing to settle with Trump, but as part of the settlement, they have to promote pro-Trump messaging, and we get our first pro-Trump PSA.
Who survived the wilderness and gave the ultimate sacrifice? Donald J. Trump.
I'm Donald J. Trump, and I endorse this message.
His penis is teeny tiny, but his love for us is large.
It is just absolutely absurd with Trump being deep-faked onto an actor, and I wish I could show what happens next, but you're just gonna have to go watch the episode. The final shot leaves us with Cartman and Butters still sitting in the car waiting for their inevitable demise, which of course will never come. Now, again, the way they made fun of Trump in this episode seems to be incredibly juvenile even for South Park, but trust me, this is all calculated, so let's get into it. So on the surface, this doesn't seem like anything particularly special. They went pretty hard on Trump, but it's not necessarily out of the ordinary for South Park. But allow me to explain what the real plan was here so that you can fully grasp the massive set of balls Matt and Trey have just put on display. So I talked in my last two videos about South Park's dealings with Paramount and how Paramount has seemingly screwed them over time and time again. I recommend you check out those videos for the full context, but this is the short version. Paramount has been dealing with a lawsuit from Warner Brothers regarding South Park streaming rights for years at this point. This has affected South Park's production greatly. Paramount is trying to merge with Skydance just as South Park is coming to the end of its contract with HBO for streaming rights. The merger is a quote shit show according to Matt and Trey, and it causes the new season to be delayed by 2 weeks. And all of this is going on while they're trying to negotiate a new deal for streaming. The incoming executives from Skydance are given control over Paramount's deals, and they change the terms of South Park's original deal they had planned with Paramount. On top of that, the executives begin meddling in their negotiations with other companies like Netflix and HBO, HBO. Matt and Trey are very upset by this, and they threatened to sue Paramount over it only 2 weeks ago from today. So Matt and Trey have been very upset with Paramount for a very long time now, and leading up to the last couple of days, we didn't even know if they would still be signing with them for exclusive streaming rights. So that's all stuff we already knew, but a couple of days ago is when shit really started to hit the fan. In those videos, I didn't mention the fact that President Trump has actually been in a lawsuit with Paramount for months now, attempting to sue them over an interview with Kamala Harris during the elections. You don't need to know the full context of that, all you need to know is that Trump is pissed off at Paramount. This wouldn't be a huge problem if it weren't for the fact that Paramount was attempting to merge with Skydance, and this merger needs approval from the FCC. The FCC is under the Trump administration, so essentially, as long as Trump is angry at Paramount and suing them, he can hold this merger above their head and prevent it from happening. Paramount realizes that if they want this merger done, they just have to give in. So they make the decision to settle with Trump for $16 million, supposedly promising another $20 million worth of screen time from Skydance when the merger actually happens.
As part of the settlement, we also had to agree to doing pro-Trump messaging.
Shortly after they agree to this, in a shocking coincidence, Paramount announces the cancellation of their decades-long Late Show with the host Stephen Colbert. They cite the fact that the Late Show was losing them tens of millions of dollars a year, but the weird part is that not only had the show just been renewed through 2026 recently, but it's also the most popular late-night show on television based on ratings. Now, if you know anything about Stephen Colbert, you know that he's not the biggest fan of Trump, and he's making fun of him pretty much every night on his show. And specifically, he called out this settlement that Paramount made with Trump as looking more like a political bribe than a legal proceeding. And consequently, Trump has been a very outspoken critic of Colbert in the past. So it definitely seems a bit coincidental that Paramount would decide to cancel the #1 late night talk show on TV while they are actively in the process of caving to the president's intimidation tactics.
I mean, who the hell does this president think he is? The government can't cancel the show. I mean, what show are they gonna cancel next?
And it looks even worse when the president immediately hops on Truth Social to celebrate Colbert's cancellation, and then also threaten the jobs of the other late night hosts who have a tendency to badmouth him. So with this lawsuit settled and the merger with Skydance all but confirmed by the president, Paramount is finally able to make a deal with South Park for a whopping $1.5 billion. Now, I'll be the first to admit that I've never been a big fan of Stephen Colbert. I personally have never found his show to be very funny, and after his cancellation, it seemed like a lot of people share that sentiment. And as much as I love South Park and think it's absolutely worth an insane amount of money, as I said in my last video, I think investing $1.5 billion into a single show for 5 years could literally never make sense from a business perspective. So I do believe Paramount when they say that Colbert was losing them money, reportedly $40 million a year. But with the timing and the sheer amount of money they were willing to give to South Park immediately after, I find it incredibly hard to believe that money was the only motivator for this decision. Trump almost certainly had something to do with it, as they reference in this episode.
You really want to end up the Colbert? You guys gotta stop being stupid.
So all of this happens earlier in the week. South Park signs their deal with Paramount on Tuesday officially, and then they release this episode. Before the ink is even dry on the contract, they immediately go after Trump 10 times harder than Colbert ever has. Now, what's weird about this is the fact that Matt and Trey have been done with Trump for a while now. They claimed that the election was one of the major reasons season 27 didn't air at the end of 2024, because they just didn't want to talk about it anymore. And even after it was announced that the season would be airing in 2025, they went out of their way to make it very clear they weren't going to be targeting Trump because they had nothing left to say about him. So were they just lying? Why would they immediately make the first episode about Trump? Well, as I said, Matt and Trey really do not like Paramount. And after seeing how all of this stuff played out with Paramount and the president, they began scheming. You see, I think they had the season premiere finished a long time ago, since it was supposed to come out at the beginning of July. But once they got delayed and saw how all of this was playing out, they went back to the drawing board and made an entirely new episode in the span of less than a week. Which, to be fair, isn't abnormal for them. Most of their episodes are made in 6 days. But they had not forgotten about what Paramount did to them, and they wanted their revenge. They knew exactly what they needed to do. They would go after Trump hard. Make him a complete caricature. Make him a naked fat guy with a tiny penis who was incredibly insecure about it. But their motivation was not just to spite Trump, no. They were just doing what they had to do in order to get a reaction out of him. They were rage baiting him, daring him to get angry about it, because they knew that it would ruin any of the good graces Paramount and Skydance had just built with him. They were intentionally provoking him in the hopes that he would either file another lawsuit against Paramount or block the Skydance merger. I mean, just look at the way they portrayed him in this this episode. As someone whose job it is to watch South Park, I can tell you in confidence that this is not normally how they would make fun of someone, especially in the modern era. I mean, just look at the way they've portrayed him in the past. They very rarely will go this juvenile with their insults. Everything that they did in this episode, from the pictures of him on the White House walls to the repeated mentions of his tiny penis, was calculated. Not only to make this episode as memeable as possible to get everyone talking about it, but to go after the things that Donald Trump has proven to respond to in the past. If they just made fun of his politics like they did in the past, no one would have cared and they would have gotten nowhere. So, they just clowned the dude in a way so over the top it wouldn't be out of place in a Looney Tunes episode. It reminded me so much of their episode on Osama bin Laden back in 2001, when they knew that no one wanted to see them make fun of the political climate or the nuance in it, so they just clowned him in a very similar way. All they cared about was getting their revenge on Paramount, and they did so in the most hilarious way possible. They took $1.5 billion from this company and immediately repaid them by spitting directly into their face, handing them a lit bomb and saying, good luck with that. This might be one of the most nefarious, evil genius business moves I have ever seen in my life, and it just made Matt and Trey billionaires. And that might be the most South Park thing they have ever done. It almost feels like the decades of Matt and Trey farting in the face of the industry has all culminated in this, becoming billionaires from this industry they despise so much and immediately telling them to go fuck themselves. And it's obvious that Matt and Trey recognize that this is a dangerous game they're playing, as the whole subplot follows Cartman and Butters trying to kill themselves. This is literally Matt and Trey's suicide attempt, acknowledging that what they're doing could very well mean the end of the show. And if it does mean the end of the show, I honestly cannot imagine a better way to go out. It's absolutely poetic, and I think it might be the funniest thing they have ever done. So now I hope you guys can start to understand the gravity of this situation, so let's finish it up by talking about my feelings on the episode overall. So the first thing I want to mention is that the show is now streaming on Paramount Plus, and there aren't any banned episodes besides the Muhammad ones, which is great to see. But I do want to mention that Matt and Trey are getting paid a flat rate regardless of if people watch on Paramount Plus, so I'm sure they could not care less if everyone started sailing the 7 seas, if you catch my drift. But one thing about this episode I was excited to see is that Garrison is seemingly back for good, and I cannot wait to see him play his old character again. It seems like they're setting up for Saddam Trump to be a recurring character, and I really hope that's the case because both him and Satan are great characters and I'd love to see him a little more often. And what are they going to do with PC Principal, who gave up on all of his PC values just because it's not popular anymore? I don't know how to feel about that. On one hand, I would love to see him return to his woke, preachy character, but on the other hand, it could be interesting to see him be an anti-woke, preachy character. I also wonder what they're going to do with Cartman, since the last we saw he was trying to kill himself because no one is woke anymore. If I had to guess, I would say that they're going to make him become woke, since he'll realize that's the most effective way to piss people off nowadays. I honestly wouldn't be surprised if the show itself did that for the same reason. I've already seen people calling South Park woke on Twitter after this episode, and I think that's pretty funny. I think what a lot of those people don't really understand is that South Park is satire. Satire is inherently counterculture. South Park has not changed at all over the years. They have always been counterculture. The only thing that has changed is the culture. South Park makes fun of whatever the dominant ideas in the culture are, and as the culture has shifted so much in the last 27 years of their show, the groups of people getting offended by the show has shifted as well. In the late 90s, early 2000s, it was the conservative, puritanical type that would get mad. Then the culture shifted towards tolerance and open-mindedness, and it was the liberals who would get mad, and now we've come full circle back to the conservatives getting mad. And honestly, I think that's just proof that South Park is doing their job well. The day people stop getting offended by South Park is the day that the show needs to end. But luckily, it doesn't seem like that'll be happening anytime soon. But all in all, I gotta say, this is one of the best episodes South Park has ever made, and we'll have to stay tuned to see the fallout. Matt and Trey have a Comic-Con panel scheduled literally for today, shortly after I'm writing this, so we'll also get to see just what they have to say about it. But that's all I have to say. This was crazy, and I'll see you guys after next week's episode, assuming the show still exists by then. So the second episode of the new season of South Park came out about a week and a half ago now, and considering I can't consistently upload for more than a couple of weeks at a time, we're back to me being incredibly late to the topic. But the episode came out right before my birthday, so cut me at least a little slack. And honestly, I'm kind of glad I waited to make this because there have been some rather interesting developments since the episode aired. But first I want to talk a little bit about the stuff that happened after the release of the first episode. I was honestly surprised when the White House made an official response to the first episode, calling it irrelevant and a fourth-rate show. The statement itself seemed awfully similar to your average Truth Social Trump rant, so I wouldn't be surprised if this came directly from the man himself. And you know, the fact that we live in the timeline where the sitting president of the United States was successfully rage baited by a cartoon giving him a tiny penis says more about the current state of affairs than I ever could. And speaking of the last episode, I recently had a conversation with the Act Man about that episode and South Park as a whole, and I highly recommend you go check out that video he made where we talk about it. Now, I talked about in the previous video how it seems like Trump might actually just be Saddam Hussein in disguise, and interestingly, the Act Man found some evidence to further support this theory when he was editing. He realized that they actually reused some of the voice lines from Saddam's previous appearances. And I don't just mean they reused the dialogue, I mean they literally used the exact same audio from an episode 27 years ago.
I thought you just bombed Iran.
Iraq, what the hell's the difference? Relax, guy.
I thought that was insane and such a crazy catch from Act Man, I knew I had to mention it here. But anyways, let's get to talking about the most recent episode. When the teaser came out, it was immediately clear that they had no plans to slow down on making fun of the current administration. We got to see Cartman as a right-wing debate bro, Mr. Mackey partaking in ice raids, and Trump being Trump. I was slightly worried going into this episode that they would kind of just be doing the same shtick they did for the previous one, and that it would just feel like a rehash trying to capitalize on how viral the previous episode was. But I have to say, I was pleasantly surprised by this episode. They didn't focus too heavily on Trump again, which was nice, and honestly, I think this episode had more funny moments than the last one. Now, obviously, I can't say it was better than the first episode because of how insane that episode was with the context, but if we're just looking at how much the episodes made me laugh, I think this one was actually better. And of course, they continued to rage bait the White House, with it working once again, this time their target giving the exact reaction they were hoping for. So enough of the intro, let's just get into it. The episode opens with our very first lines from Kyle of the entire season. Yeah, he didn't have a single line of dialogue in the premiere. These would also turn out to be his last lines from the episode, as he completely vanishes from the story following this scene. But him and Wendy are complaining about the horrible things that someone is saying on a podcast about Jews and women, and obviously we all immediately think that it's Cartman saying these things. But as we find out, this is not the case.
Hey guys, who are you talking about? Clyde. Clyde?
Now, weirdly enough, this kind of makes sense for his character. He joined QAnon in the vaccination special, refused to get the vaccine even to save the world in the post-COVID specials, and believes that Kyle runs Hollywood in season 26. He's pretty red-pilled, so becoming a right-wing debate bro is a surprisingly appropriate character development. So he gets sent to Mr. Mackey's office where he explains his reasoning.
Hey, I'm just trying to make my nut, man.
Your nut?
My nut's about $60 a week. So, you know, as a kid, if you could do a podcast, say some really divisive shit, then you could make your nut.
Now, the whole make your nut thing is a phrase they use a lot throughout this episode, and I was pretty confused by this. Apparently, nut referring to money is an old phrase, essentially meaning making enough to cover your necessities, but nowadays, the way it's used has a very different connotation, and I spent the entire episode trying to figure out if this was supposed to be a joke or not. So Mr. Mackey ends up getting fired due to the government cutting funding for schools, a reference to the current administration's plans for major budget cuts in the Department of Education.
Schools have one counselor now, and he is the greatest counselor that ever lived. Thanks for everything, now pack your shit.
Cartman makes an appearance on Clyde's podcast where he is absolutely infuriated that Clyde is essentially doing his thing and monetizing it, even stealing his famous catchphrase.
Also be sure to hashtag respect Clyde's authority. What?
Clyde is clearly meant to be a Nick Fuentes type in this scene, and Cartman's anger at him taking a shtick is clearly a play on the fact that these kinds of political talking heads are basically just profiting off of acting like Cartman. Mr. Mackey then goes to the bank to get some financial advice now that he can't afford his nut, and while he's there, he just so happens to run into one of the most iconic South Park memes.
Then we'll reinvest the earnings into foreign currency accounts with compounding interest, and it's gone.
His financial advice is basically just to get a new job. Specifically, he suggests that Mr. Mackey tries to work for the ICE. We then get to see ICE's new recruitment video, which has some pretty hilarious lines advertising how they will hire literally anyone, including the fan favorite World of Warcraft guy from season 10. Did you know that guy was modeled after Pirate Software's dad? Did you know that Pirate Software worked at Blizzard for 75 years? He doesn't really talk about it though. So now Clyde is debating with students on campus at school, constantly diverting the debates into his own rehearsed talking points, despite them having nothing to do with the debate itself.
Well, you said nothing good ever came from the Jews, but if that's true, why are bagels so yummy?
Yeah.
Well, you've obviously been taught by the Jews to have a problem with this school and with America, so let me ask you this. What is your definition of a woman?
What is my what?
You see, you can't answer the question, but something is male or it is female. Both sides in scripture agree to that, and that's just the truth. Next!
Another woke student totally destroyed.
Cartman is fed up with Clyde stealing his shtick, so he beats him up and takes his place owning the woke liberals. He's rocking a very specific haircut and continues with the same talking points. Now, if you don't know, Cartman is representing Charlie Kirk. He's a right-wing figure whose whole thing is debating liberal students on college campuses. He was a pioneer in the whole debating college girls who think they know everything because they took one sociology class and owning the SJWs genre of content I used to watch when I was 14. He's a pretty polarizing figure for obvious reasons, and having Cartman be mad that he's getting paid to act like him is pretty on brand. So seeing no other options, Mr. Mackey decides to try to sign up for ICE, where he's given an absolutely rigorous interview process where only the best of the best get the job.
What makes you want to work for immigration enforcement?
Well, you see, I got a nut.
All right, you're hired. Take this to the next station for your physical and orientation video.
He then gets to watch an orientation video featuring the Director of Homeland Security, Kristi Noem. In the video, she discusses how she once had to put down her puppy by shooting it. This is immediately followed by several scenes of her randomly and indiscriminately shooting puppies for no apparent reason. Now, I wasn't familiar with the story that this was referring to, so I did some research into it, and it is so much more insane than I thought it was. In her book, Kristi Noem talks about how she had gotten a 14-month-old puppy for pheasant hunting, which she took on one hunting trip where it supposedly ruined the hunting trip by chasing away the birds and, quote, having the time of its life. Apparently, after the trip, it also killed some chickens from another family and tried to bite someone, and at this point, she decided that the puppy, which was named Cricket, was, quote, untrainable, dangerous to anyone she came in contact with, and less than worthless as a hunting dog. So, of course, she did the only logical thing and brought the dog to a nearby gravel pit and shot it in the... brought the puppy to a nearby gravel pit where she then shot it in the head. Now, just to clarify, I'm not laughing at the fact that this woman shot her puppy. I'm laughing at just how absurd this whole situation is. Now, she says that she told this story to emphasize how she's willing to do the, quote, difficult, messy, and ugly things in politics, but I don't think it had the desired effect, considering this story just makes her seem like a woman who didn't train her puppy, then slaughtered said untrained 14-month-old puppy for acting like an untrained 14-month-old puppy. I mean, it just seems like a bit of an overreaction, Kristi. I know a guy that might be able to help you next time before it gets to the point where you have to execute the dog.
Yeah, well, I don't see why... Hey!
So Mr. Mackey continues through the ICE Center preparing for his first raid, and I really love how they portrayed it like a ride at Disney, going through the queues and watching the video before getting on the ride. That was great.
Keep your hands and feet inside the vehicle at all times.
As they approach their first target, Kristi Noem gives the team a rundown.
We're heading to a location that might be filled with illegals. Let's take these bad hombres down.
During the raid, Kristi also stops to take out the super dangerous threat of a service dog. Meanwhile, Cartman continues debating with these college girls, and his mom starts to get fed up with it, but at this point, he's a master debater. It's completely overtaken his life, and he just can't seem to stop. He gets caught master debating once again, and he explains to his mom why it's just so addicting.
You told me to go to sleep, but I started master debating again.
I'm getting really good at this. I have my arguments down rock solid. These young college girls are totally unprepared, so I can just destroy them and also edit out all the ones that actually argue back well. It just feels so good.
Now, obviously, there's the clear wordplay going on here with master debating, which is a pretty dumb and juvenile joke, but the more I thought about it, the more it actually seemed like it was supposed to be a statement on how these debate bros operate. How they go out of their way to debate against these college kids who clearly have no clue what they're talking about and have no skills in debating. It feels like these dudes are just preying on easy targets to feed their own egos. This whole act of owning woke liberals just feels very self-absorbed and indulgent. It's like an NBA player going to their local Planet Fitness and playing a team of full-time plumbers like he's playing the Pacers just to make himself feel better. Not that Charlie Kirk would be on par with the NBA players of the debate world, but you get my point. It feels masturbatory, and this whole bit calling it master debating felt intentional, like that's the point they were trying to make.
It just feels so good.
Or I might just be reading into it too deeply, and Matt and Trey just wanted to make a dumb joke about jerking off, which is probably the more likely answer. Meanwhile, an ICE protester points out that a lot of the Latinos they're rounding up are good people, probably going to heaven, which of course means that ICE now has their next target. And unfortunately, as we all know, all dogs go to heaven, which means another victim of Kristi Noem. Now, the idea of Ice raiding heaven is probably one of my favorite jokes from the episode, with the obvious point being that they're not actually going after only the bad hombres, as they say. They're pretty much just targeting Latinos as a whole. Now, one thing I haven't mentioned yet is that while they clearly go after Ice pretty hard in this episode, it seems like they're pretty sympathetic towards their employees, at least the ones like Mr. Mackey. He's constantly apologizing to the people they're rounding up and trying to justify his actions to himself because he clearly doesn't enjoy doing this. And I think that's kind of meant to pity the people like this who are clearly just doing what they have to make their nut. And with the economy how it currently is, it's hard to blame people who are just trying to feed their families. But at this point, the episode decides to throw away the very small amount of subtlety that was remaining when Cartman takes a trip to the annual Charlie Kirk Awards for Young Master Debaters. The winner gets an all-expenses-paid trip to a 5-star resort, but unfortunately for Cartman, Clyde ends up winning. And I really like the way that he delivers his acceptance speech because I feel like it further emphasizes the point they're making about how these people are just saying the most inflammatory things they can think of to get a reaction out of people and make more money.
The Civil Rights Act was a huge mistake, and, I don't know, lesbians are an abomination of God.
You all stole my stick! Yes!
Meanwhile, Mr. Mackey finds out that as he makes more money, his nut has increased as well, to the point where he still can't afford it. So when Kristi tells him that the president wants to help him with his nut, he decides to accept it and flies out to Mar-a-Lago. Mackey gets introduced to both the president and the vice president, giving us our first look at J.D. Vance, whose design and voice made me laugh harder than anything else in this episode.
What is his fantasy, Bob?
Hey, will you get out of here?
I don't know what it is about J.D. Vance's face that makes it so perfect for meme edits of him, but it is always hilarious, and this is no exception. I'm pretty sure they even photoshopped his face on his character because there's no way he actually looks like that, right? At this point, I have seen so many edits of him, I can't even remember what he actually looks like. So Trump offers Mackey a job as the face of Homeland Security, replacing Kristi Noem, but to get the job, they put Mackey a bit out of his comfort zone.
I just want to go. This place is gross.
Would you like me to apply the baby oil to Satan's asshole, boss?
He panics and runs into the hallway where he walks into some pretty disturbing scenes, including Dora crying while giving a massage to some random old man. Now, when I first saw the design of Mar-a-Lago and the way they did the water landing with the plane and everything, it immediately popped into the back of my mind that they're trying to draw a parallel with a certain island, and then once we got to this scene, all of my suspicions were confirmed. Now, making Mar-a-Lago Epstein Island is pretty funny, but they don't really go anywhere with it, so I wonder what the point of including it in this episode was. It feels like it was setting up to say something and then they just didn't. I kind of wish they had just saved this for another episode. Mr. Mackey eventually stumbles across Clyde, where they both discuss how they were just trying to make their nut, but they didn't want all of this. This kind of reflects back to what I was talking about with their sympathy towards Mr. Mackey. But Mr. Mackey ends up coming to his senses and decides that he is a counselor once and for all, and him and Clyde look for someone to help them escape. And who's that in the sky coming to save us? It's super oh no. Kristi Noem's here. She's very upset about Trump trying to replace her, but her face melts off and begins attacking people. I haven't really mentioned it yet, but there's a running gag throughout this episode that her face keeps melting off and it has to be put back on by her assistants due to all the plastic surgery she has. So Mr. Mackey, Clyde, and Dora the Explorer end up heading for a plane to escape, and they put Kristi's face back on, and then out of nowhere, everyone just decides to start singing, which is a reference to A Charlie Brown Christmas, and then they roll credits. Now you may be thinking, that seems like a very sudden and random ending. I must be leaving something out. But no, that is actually how it ends, and no, I have no idea why it ends that way. But now that you know what happened in the episode, let's talk about the reactions from those who were targeted and my feelings on the episode as a whole. We will start with how the ICE themselves reacted to the episode. When the teaser for this episode was released, the official Department of Homeland Security Twitter page posted a link to join ICE alongside South Park's depiction of them. This is of course very ironic because just a couple of weeks ago, the White House was calling South Park irrelevant and a fourth-rate show. Of course, the official South Park Twitter page noticed this and responded by pointing out the irony in the situation, which I thought was pretty funny. Charlie Kirk did a similar thing as they released the trailer and he made the Cartman version of himself himself his profile picture on all of his social medias. And then once the episode actually came out, he not only kept it as his profile picture, but would also make a video reacting to his scenes from the episode. Now, it's pretty clear watching that video that not only was he not offended, but he actually found it pretty funny, which of course is generally the best way to respond to South Park, because if you've watched my South Park celebrity parody video, you would know that getting upset at your South Park parody is the easiest way to make yourself a target once again and just look kind of unlikable. Now, for whatever reason, this reaction brought out some of the most annoying people on Twitter to talk about it, where liberals and left-wingers constantly felt the need to remind Charlie that actually you're not in on the joke. They're laughing at you, not with you. They hate you. He doesn't even know that they actually don't like him. And it's just like, guys, do you really think he doesn't know that? I watched that whole video where he reacted to the episode, and it was pretty clear that he understood they were making fun of him. I mean, I can't really say the same about the other dudes with him. One of them even said that South Park was revering him, which is just objectively not true, but Charlie himself got it. He just doesn't care. I mean, essentially the main way they parody him in this episode is just quoting him. This is all stuff he said before and agrees with. Why would he be offended? And obviously he knows that Matt and Trey disagree with him and don't like him, but he doesn't care. He spends most of the reaction talking about how crazy it is that what he does is now a big enough part of the culture for South Park to even acknowledge him. He's not coping, he's just proud of what he's created. Now, I'm not saying this because I'm a fan of Charlie Kirk or anything. I think he's a self-obsessed grifter who just does whatever he can to pander to the audience he built and make as much money as possible from them. I genuinely think he's a scumbag who just takes advantage of people who clearly have no clue what they're talking about just to make himself feel good. But there is one thing you have to realize about guys like this. They've been getting called horrible people, racists, Nazis, basically every way you can label a person as bad for years at this point. Do you really think South Park throwing some jabs at him is gonna hurt his feelings at all? I mean, when you have thousands of people telling you that you're a literal Nazi every day, why would South Park calling you a grifter and saying you have a dumb haircut bother you in the slightest? I mean, I feel like he's proven time and time again that he's proud of who he is, so portraying him as accurately as they did in the episode isn't even an insult to him. So no, he's not coping and pretending to not care. He just doesn't see anything wrong with what they made fun of him for, so he has no reason to be offended. And seeing all of these online leftists getting upset because they think he doesn't understand it or is trying to cover it is just cringe. Like, it's honestly just embarrassing to be mad about the fact that someone else isn't mad about something. But you know, now that I say that out loud, that is definitely a very liberal thing to do. And don't even get me started about the conservatives on Twitter who pretended to not be mad about the first episode only to complain about the fact that South Park never made fun of Joe Biden. I honestly might make a whole separate video about that because that is probably more annoying than this. You know, I think I just need to stop going on Twitter so much. But anyways, let's move from Charlie Kirk to JD Vance, who posted a tweet saying that he's finally made it now that he's been parodied on South Park. So not much of anything from him, but the real focus of this episode was Kristi Noem, who wasn't quite as smart as the others in her reaction to the episode. In an interview, she decided to try to fire some shots back at the show for how they portrayed her, but the shots probably missed and hit a puppy somewhere.
It's so lazy to just constantly make fun of women for how they look. If they wanted to criticize my job, go ahead and do that, but clearly they can't. They just pick something petty like that.
Now, what I find very funny about this statement is the fact that she immediately went to the idea that it's lazy to make fun of specifically women for their looks. Like, sure, you could argue that making fun of someone's looks in general is lazy, but why specifically women? Not to mention the fact that South Park has made fun of countless men for their looks as well. It has nothing to do with your gender. It almost feels like she's specifying the gender thing to act like it's because she's a woman, which is so strange to me because using your identity as a shield to deflect criticism has been the ultimate ability of liberals for years now, and now the conservatives are doing it too? I'm telling you, man, something is wrong with our current timeline. She also said that she hasn't actually seen the episode, which I kind of believe considering she had nothing to say about the countless puppies she slaughtered in it. But following her response, the South Park Twitter page would make their own response by simply changing their profile picture to a picture of her melting face, which is every bit as petty as I would expect from Matt and Trey. But now that we've covered the reactions to this episode, let's talk about the episode itself. All in all, I really enjoyed this episode. As I said in the intro, I thought there were even more funny moments in this one than the previous one, and it was all around pretty great. Now, what I didn't like was the ending. Like I said, it was super abrupt and made absolutely no sense at all. The episode almost felt rushed in this regard. It felt like they had everything done up till like the last 3 minutes of the episode and just didn't have time to give it a proper ending, so they just cut it off. And to me, it's really weird that it felt rushed because of the fact that they got an extra week to work on it. I would have expected them to have it refined and ready to go. But honestly, I think they just tried to do too much at the end, introducing the Mar-a-Lago plot and the Epstein parallels. From that point on, it seemed like an entirely new episode. I think they honestly just got a little too ambitious with what they tried to fit into 22 minutes, and it made me wonder if maybe they were going to try to have another serialized season with the plot of the next episode picking up where this left off. I mean, that's the only way that ending would make any sense at all, but honestly, I kind of hope they don't do that because true serialization in South Park has never gone well in my opinion. And while I have really enjoyed these last 2 episodes, I also have 2 main things that I'm hoping for the rest of the season. First, that the entire season doesn't become exclusively political parodies. I really don't want the show to fall back into the trap of seeing whatever is happening in the news and giving us a weekly recap. They've done that in the past, and it has resulted in some of the worst seasons of the show. And second, I hope they find a way to incorporate the boys into the story more. I mean, Kyle has literally had only like 2 lines of dialogue in the entire first 2 episodes, and Stan, Kenny, and Butters have all only had minor parts in each episode. The boys will always be the core of South Park for me, and the show tends to be at its best when they're the focus. So that's pretty much all I have to say about this one. This season is off to a very hot start, and I'm hoping that they can maintain the quality throughout the rest of it. And with the next episode releasing in only a few days, I'll talk to you again very soon. So episode 3 of the new season of South Park just came out, and with it we have some seemingly major changes to South Park moving forward. The biggest of which being that it seems like at long last they have finally decided to move on from Tegrity Farms, Randy's weed farm, which has been a major focus of the show over the last 4 seasons. I gotta say, I was genuinely surprised by this. If you've kept up with South Park over these last 7 years, you would know that Tegrity Farms has been very divisive among the fan base. I mean, some people loved it, but a lot of people hated just how heavily the show focused on it. And of course, Matt and Trey, being Matt and Trey, knew this and essentially trolled the audience over and over again by hinting at the end of Tegrity Farms in many episodes, only to pull the rug out from under us every single time. So when the end of this episode seemed to show Tegrity Farms being gone for good, I'm not gonna lie, it made me a little sad. I mean, this is the end of a pretty major era of the show, certainly one that I wasn't the biggest fan of, but Tegrity did produce some gems during its time, and I've become so accustomed to it that I have no clue what the show will look like without it. But in terms of my feelings on this episode as a whole, I thought it was just okay. I know this is shocking to hear coming from the #1 South Park glazer on the internet, but just because I love the show doesn't mean I think everything they do is groundbreaking and hilarious. I'll go more into what I liked and disliked about the episode as we talk about it, but for the most part, I thought it was just kinda mid. It definitely had a lot of funny ideas and relevant commentary covering things like tech companies powered by AI, the president receiving gifts which are totally not bribes from all these CEOs and world leaders, and how AI is making all of us feel smarter while actually making us significantly dumber. As I'll talk about, I feel like these ideas had the potential to be very funny, they just weren't super funny. So with the intro out of the way, let's get into it. The episode opens and we're back at Tegrity Farms, where Randy is shooting an ad for his business featuring all of his hardworking Mexicans. We immediately get a call back to the previous episode as all of his Mexicans are rounded up by ICE and taken away. Fortunately, there were no puppies on the premises because we all know how that would have ended. Randy tells the family that due to the government constantly deporting his workers, they might have to sell the farm. Now, as I mentioned, I was immediately skeptical of this considering Randy has said this several times over the course of the Tegrity Farms arc, and of course he always finds a way out of it. But the rest of the family seems pretty excited at the prospect of finally leaving the farm, to which Randy is surprised.
You guys never told me that.
Yes, we did.
I found Randy's delivery here to be pretty funny because not only have the rest of his family told him probably dozens of times how much they hate being on the farm, the fans themselves have been voicing their complaints for years now, and I think this is Matt and Trey continuing to troll the audience by playing dumb and being like, wait, really? You guys don't like this? We never knew that. Why didn't you guys tell us? Randy tells Sharon that they should talk to someone about their marital issues, and by that, of course, he means talking to ChatGPT about it. They portray ChatGPT as just constantly sucking up to whoever is using it, telling Randy what good ideas he has and encouraging him to fix the issues with the farm instead of just moving on.
You're really smart, and if you've lost a lot of your workforce because of government crackdowns, we just need to brainstorm some new business models.
This idea of Sickofancy is kind of the major recurring theme throughout the episode, which I expected given that the name of the episode is literally Sickofancy. So meanwhile, Towley is doing the same thing, asking ChatGPT to help him find a new job due to the farm closing down, but Randy interrupts and tells him that ChatGPT helped him come up with the plan to fix the farm. So they head down to Tweak Bros Coffee, where they brainstorm different ideas for the company with ChatGPT, who of course tells them that all of their ideas are great and offers to help them plan it out.
Wow, I feel smarter already.
Do you feel smarter? I feel smarter. She's making us smarter.
AI is is incredible.
I do like the point they're making here about how AI is making people feel smarter by offering them all the information they could possibly ask for, while in reality it's making them much dumber by allowing them to do all of this without actually using their brains at all. They're basically just outsourcing all of the thinking to a robot who keeps telling them that they're smart. I don't think I need to explain how that could destroy someone's critical thinking abilities. So their new plan is to convert Tegrity into a tech company, and of course if they want to be tech CEOs, they have to get into character.
Ketamine? Isn't that a horse tranquilizer?
Yeah, it's a microdose of horse tranquilizer.
This is in reference specifically to Elon Musk, who's talked about how he uses ketamine, but it's pretty common knowledge that many of the executives at these tech companies are regularly microdosing some form of mind-altering substance, whether that be ketamine, shrooms, acid, really anything to improve their creativity. I also find it very funny that Towley is the one who's hesitant to take the ketamine, considering he was the one smoking meth and huffing computer duster back in season 14. We then get to see Randy's commercial for the new and improved Tegrity, now known as Tecrity. This commercial does a wonderful job of not explaining what the company actually does while tossing together a word salad of tech buzzwords that would convince any clueless investor to buy in, an art that all modern tech companies have perfected. On one hand, I thought this scene was funny because of just how accurate it was, but on the other hand, it was almost too accurate, to the point where it felt like I was just listening to someone talk about why their tech company is the future, and there is nothing on the planet more annoying than that. So it kind of made the scene less enjoyable in my opinion.
Goodbye, oh, I'm in a hole.
Randy won't stop talking to ChatGPT in bed, and Sharon gets annoyed and goes to sleep on the couch.
Go ahead and have fun with your little sycophant machine.
Hey, so what's a sycophant?
We then cut to the White House, where the president is receiving gifts from different CEOs all over the world who are constantly telling him what great ideas he has and clarifying that his penis is absolutely not small in any way. My favorite one was Tim Cook, who handed him an Apple plaque with a 24-karat gold base. This is my favorite because it wasn't even a joke. This is literally what happened a couple weeks ago when Tim Cook visited Trump in the White House. For context, Trump announced tariffs on computer chips and semiconductors, but the tariff wouldn't apply to any companies that were willing to commit to manufacturing in the United States. Now, some might read this gift of a literal block of gold to a president who famously loves gold as being essentially a bribe to avoid these tariffs. I wouldn't say something like that personally, but some might. And of course, Apple isn't the first to decide to give Trump a gift when it would be very beneficial to be in his good graces. Elon Musk gave him a car, the Qatari government gifted him a Boeing 747, Zelensky gave him a golf club. Trump loves gifts, and CEOs and world leaders are using that to their advantage to get on his good side. Appealing to the ego of someone like Trump is the easiest way to get through to them, so it's definitely the smart thing to do. This also continues with the central theme of the episode, with the CEO sucking up to the president in a very similar way to how ChatGPT does to the user. Meanwhile, Randy and Towley, fueled by a ketamine bender, decide to break into an ICE detention center because they need one Mexican for their business, using ChatGPT every step of the process.
Hey, so I have this big generator that I need help shutting off.
Sharon decides to give ChatGPT a try and begins to understand why it's so appealing to Randy. Mainly the fact that it'll say you have a great idea no matter how stupid the idea actually is. Randy's new plan to expand the business is to have marijuana's classification as a Schedule 1 substance removed, and to do so, he sends Towley to Washington, D.C. with a gift for the president. We get a montage of Towley exploring D.C., which of course is heavily militarized due to Trump's recent deployment of the National Guard to deal with their high violent crime rate. We also see that many of the statues have been replaced with Trump's face, and of course they all have tiny penises to match. When he makes it to the White House, we get to see all of the other CEOs there to give Trump a gift, and I love how they included Bezos and Zuckerberg looking just like they did in their previous appearances. Although I do wish we got some voice lines from them. I would have loved to hear Zuckerberg talk about his style.
The founder and chairman of Facebook, but I also have a style that is completely unblockable.
Towley gives his gift to the president, which turns out to be a hologram of Randy explaining their desire to reclassify marijuana and offering Towley as a gift to the president.
Put the towel in with the other gifts. No, wait! There's been a misunderstanding!
This is a reference to Return of the Jedi when Luke offers up C-3PO and R2-D2 to Jabba the Hutt. While Towley is being dragged away, Randy is sitting on his porch, looking a little worse for wear. He did too much ketamine and now he's in a K-hole, where Sharon decides to use what she learned from ChatGPT and does an impression of it, doing the Sickofancy thing and offering to help Randy.
No problem. Would you like me to start laying out some exit strategies for you, with a focus on retaining any assets you might still have?
One thing I greatly appreciated about the scene is just how funny they made Randy look. One of my favorite aspects of old South Park is how the crude animation style often made for some very funny visual gags, and with the improved animation in the modern episodes, you just never see that anymore. So seeing Randy like this was the first time in a very long time where they've captured that old feeling, and I greatly appreciated it. We then see the family packing up all of their belongings, officially marking the end of Tegrity Farms. Randy's explanation for leaving unfortunately makes a lot of sense.
Right now, there's just no place for Tegrity.
We then cut back to the White House where the president's antics have been turned into a sitcom, even including a laugh track.
If you have to have sex with yourself again, I can bring you a cum rag.
God, I hate this place!
This felt kind of random at first, but as I thought about it more, I think that this is supposed to be a moment of self-awareness from the show, sort of making fun of the fact that all the Trump stuff is getting a little tired, with the crowd hysterically laughing at the same jokes they've been doing for 3 episodes now. If that's the case, I think that's a good sign, because maybe it means the Trump stuff won't play such a major role anymore. Satan goes to the bathroom to clear his head, where he stumbles across Towley, who has been made into the president's personal cum rag. He asks for help, but Satan isn't exactly optimistic.
There is no escape from this place.
And that's where the episode ends. So now, let's talk about what I liked about this episode, my issues with it, and what it could mean for the show moving forward. Okay, so my biggest complaint about this episode is that it just wasn't that funny. Like I said, there was a lot of funny ideas, but it seemed like the majority of the humor derived from the ideas themselves. Let me give you some examples of what I mean. The idea of Randy talking to ChatGPT instead of his wife was funny, but the scene itself wasn't. The idea of Randy and Tally using ChatGPT to break into the ice center while high on ketamine to steal a Mexican is funny, but hearing my description of it alone would probably be just as funny as the actual scene. The problem is that there just weren't that many attempts at jokes in this episode. Now, when there was a joke, it was funny more often than not, but a lot of the episode we just listened to someone having a conversation with ChatGPT, and during those scenes, there's no jokes aside from the idea of using ChatGPT to fix all your problems. And I felt the same way about the Trump stuff. It seems like they just thought it would be funny to animate Trump getting gifts, which it was, but there were basically no jokes in the actual scenes at all. The only joke is that the CEOs say Trump doesn't have a tiny penis. Other than that, it's just a scene of CEOs handing Trump gifts, which again, the concept is funny, but the actual scene really isn't. Now, like I said, there were still things I found funny about this episode. I liked Randy acting confused at the beginning. I thought Towley's horrific fate was funny, if not a little bit sad, and I even laughed at the tiny penises on the Trump statues as much as that joke seems to have run its course. And for me, it's kind of frustrating because they had so many funny ideas. It just felt like they didn't really flesh any of them out that well. From the very beginning of the episode, I could tell that this one was going to feel more like a filler episode than anything. I half expected this music to start playing, but I think that was kind of the intention with this episode. It was more of a transitional one, in the sense that it seems like they wanted to get rid of Tegrity Farms, and they felt like it deserved a full episode for its send-off. And I'm hoping that the reasoning for this was to have Stan and Randy back in the town, free to interact with the boys and the rest of the town again. The fact that the episode seemed to really focus heavily on the storyline rather than the jokes makes me think that they really wanted to have this episode to set up for whatever is next. And as I mentioned in the previous video, I hope that's a lot more focus on the boys and less of the political stuff. Like I said, I think the political stuff can be funny. I just feel the show falling back into that trap of, let's just animate whatever happened in the news this week and that should be funny enough. That was so prevalent back in season 20, and I really hope they don't continue down that path. But overall, I didn't dislike this episode. I was definitely entertained and it had its moments. I just found it to be kind of underwhelming comedically. But hey, with the death of Tegrity Farms, we can finally move past this ever polarizing version of the show, and I'm excited to see where it takes us. Oh yeah, and the next episode isn't coming out for 2 weeks again. I guess this is just the schedule they decided for this season instead of weekly, so that kind of sucks, but I guess I'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Labubu's.
I love the blue one.
They're everywhere. I can't escape them. No, leave me alone. Please just leave me alone. Leave me alone. Oh, what a terrible nightmare. It feels like I can't escape those things. Oh, look at that. They just dropped a teaser for the new South Park episode. Thank God. Something to finally take my mind off these weird dolls. Wait, no, leave me alone. Please just leave me alone. So the new episode of South Park just came out, and honestly, when I saw the teaser, I could not contain my excitement. We were gonna get a whole episode all about Labubu's, the hit new collectible that women all across the nation are dying to get their hands on. But of course, I'm not like all the other guys. I love Labubu's. I keep them all over my bag I bring to my local matcha shop where I study feminist literature and listen to Claro. I'm also 6'3", by the way. I mean, you know me. Pilates, sipping Labubu Dubai chocolate matcha latte with AirPods in, bumping the Nelk Boys Netanyahu podcast.
Like Burger King over McDonald's?
That's your worst take, I think.
Where am I? What happened? Dude, you had another performative male consumerist episode. Oh, really? Again? Damn, I really need to get off TikTok. You know, I'm not gonna lie, I wrote this script at like 3:30 in the morning, and it all made a lot more sense when I was writing it. I have no clue what any of this means. I am so sorry. Let's get back to talking about this new episode of South Park. In all seriousness, it was a pretty solid episode. They went after all sorts of things: tariffs, Christianity, satanic rituals, Labubus, Fox News, the president, and of course, Satan Mpreg, which was definitely a bold choice, but I respect it. Overall, this episode had plenty of funny moments and scathing commentary, and I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't say it's the best of the season, but it's definitely a step up from the previous episode in my opinion. So now, let's get to talking about Jesus being a school counselor, Satan being pregnant, and of course, the Labubu addiction sweeping the nation. The episode opens with two girls discussing their new Labubus in the hall. Cartman quickly takes notice and lets everyone know it's about to go down. When one of the girls accuses the other of potentially having a bootleg Labubu, things escalate very quickly and they start throwing hands. So fun fact, the blonde girl whose name is Betsy is actually voiced by Trey Parker's 12-year-old daughter Betty, and I have to imagine that your dad asking you to say this kind of stuff has to be the most fun a 12-year-old could possibly have.
If anyone's fake, it's probably yours, you fat bitch. Suck it, skank! Shit!
So the girls get sent to the counselor, who is Jesus, after Mr. Mackey went to work for ICE. He's pretty confused by all of this, and he asks the same question that I'm sure much of my older audience is asking right now.
What is a Labubu?
So if you don't know, Labubus are these little monster doll things from Hong Kong which have absolutely exploded in popularity in recent times. Their whole gimmick is that you buy a box and you don't know what kind you're going to get until you open it, with some Labubus being much rarer than others. The rarest, most coveted ones have sold for upwards of tens of thousands of dollars. Essentially, they're just collectible accessories that you get by gambling and flex on your friends with. Now this is the part where the cynical side of me wants to talk about how this is so dumb and I just don't understand it, but given my past addiction to opening Counter-Strike cases, I'm not gonna lie, I totally understand it. So Jesus decides the best way to prevent any more fights is to just confiscate the dolls for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, Butters is on the playground with Scott Malkinson and Dougie when Red comes up and asks him nervously if he wants to come to her birthday party. He's absolutely shocked that she would ask him to come, but he agrees to come and she sends him her birthday wish list, which is less of a list and more of just a single item, a Labubu. So of course to us, it's immediately clear that Red is trying to manipulate Butters into buying her the Labubu by making him think that she's interested in him romantically, which reminded me a lot of the Raisins episode from back in season 7. But of course, Butters is just as clueless as usual.
I think on Saturday I'm gonna find out if red-haired girls have a red bush.
Now what I found very funny about this line in particular is that it reestablishes a character trait in Butters that we haven't seen since season 14, and that's that he is canonically obsessed with bushes.
I never seen that part of a lady. Do they all got a hedge like that?
I don't know if they just wanted to make this joke and the fact that it was Butters was just a coincidence, but I like to think it was intentional and I really appreciated it. So Butters goes to visit the Asian pop-up shop, which is just City Walk converted into an Asian pop-up shop. And when Butters mentions this, Luke Kim explains what has changed.
Didn't you hear the news? Walkie's dead.
I thought this was a funny callback to one of the major through lines of the season, that Woke is officially dead, which is what Cartman was complaining about back in the first episode. So Butters tries to buy the specific Labubu that Red wants, but Luke Kim explains the whole mystery box thing that I explained a second ago. So Butters is forced to buy a mystery box, which is significantly more expensive because of the tariffs in place, which Luke Kim explains the economics of to Butters.
Yeah, you gotta pay tariff. You think I pay tariff? No, you pay tariff.
Using Labubus to comment on how tariffs push the expenses to the customer rather than the company was a pretty clever way to make the point, but what I really liked about this scene was all the callbacks we got to previous episodes. For example, Luke Kim selling various Chinpokomons, which honestly the whole Labubu plot of this episode reminded me a lot of the original Chinpokomon episode, so I'm glad they threw that Easter egg in. And of course the fact that we got to see Wing again, which I totally didn't expect. If you don't know, Wing was established as Luke Kim's wife in her own episode back in season 9. The character is actually a parody of a real woman, and her appearance in the episode has an insane backstory, which is way too much to explain in this video, so I recommend you go check out my every South Park celebrity parody explained video if you want to know more. But yeah, it was super cool to see her again. I'm pretty sure it was her first speaking role since that episode back in season 9, which is just insane. We then cut to a Fox News alert whose reporters are busy asking Donald Trump about only the most pressing issues.
Are you fucking Satan?
He is fucking Satan.
Meanwhile, Jesus is in a meeting at school with the rest of the staff, expressing his concern over the amount of fights that have broken out because of the Labubu's. The rest of the teachers show him a Labubu unboxing TikTok, which quickly takes a very dark turn.
Okay, let's see. Oh my god! Oh my god!
What the hell was that? Oh, yeah, Labubus are demonic.
I don't know if they come that way from China or their kids are infusing them with some Sumerian dark entity.
It's Mesopotamian.
Honestly, this was probably my favorite scene from the whole episode. Making the rare Labubus be used in demonic rituals was a hilarious way to make fun of the cult-like following these things have developed. And also, it's actually become a pretty popular conspiracy that Labubus are actually demonic, being based on the Mesopotamian demon Pazuzu, known for bringing chaos to the world. Now, the creator says that Labubus were actually inspired by Nordic fairy tales and mythology, and that there's nothing demonic about them, but of course, that's exactly what a Satanist would say to keep a low profile. But because Christian conservative mothers like to call every new trend demonic and get all of their information directly from Facebook, there's a large portion of teenage girls who may never be allowed to own their very own Labubu. How tragic. So Butters didn't get the right Labubu, so when he goes back to buy another mystery box, he finds out that the price has gone up even more due to the tariffs. He can't even afford to buy a new one, so Liu Kim tells him to try to win it out of the claw machine, which is basically still gambling to get the one that you want. We get another breaking news alert from Fox, who continues to glaze Trump for his relationship with Satan.
I think the president is definitely fucking Satan, and I love it.
Yeah, this whole bit is not exactly subtle. So Jesus goes to investigate the Asian pop-up shop, and he warns Liu Kim that the dolls are cursed. And I thought Liu Kim's response was incredibly funny.
Yeah, no shit, they cursed. It's called tariff. You passed it along. I the curse, I put the curse on you. It's like an AIDS.
While they're distracted, Butters manages to get lucky and win the rare Labubu, and he dips out before Jesus can warn him. So meanwhile, at the White House, Satan is feeling pretty down about all of this when, of course, my new favorite character shows up just in time to comfort him.
Why are you so sad?
I genuinely think this is the one bit from this season that will never get old to me. I don't know what it is, but JD Vance's character is so funny and I can never get enough of it. So Satan reveals to Vance that he can't leave because of something inside a box, but he's not willing to reveal what it is yet. So Butters shows up to Red's party with the new Labubu, and Red absolutely loses her mind, telling Butters how much she loves him. And with this Labubu, the ritual can take place. But Butters doesn't really seem to understand what's going on.
We're gonna go upstairs and do it!
Whoa, we're gonna what?
She immediately gets started with the ritual, and Butters watches on in horror as the Dark One is summoned. Satan ends up showing up as well, which of course means that Fox News has the coverage. But just as Satan goes to leave, Jesus shows up to face him. And honestly, I was half expecting them to start throwing hands like they did back in season 1, but instead Jesus just commands him to leave this realm. Seeing no other option, Satan finally confirms the rumors about him and Trump and says that he can't leave because he's pregnant. Okay. Fox News then calls on to their resident scientist to confirm that this is indeed possible.
The term is butt baby.
And most importantly, they cut to Kid Rock being overcome with emotion upon hearing the news. The episode ends with Jesus banning Labubus and TikTok from school, and Butters and Red both get 3 weeks detention. So now let's talk about what I liked about this episode and what all of this could mean moving forward. So without a doubt, my favorite part of this episode was definitely the satanic rituals being done with Labubus. I'm a massive sucker for when a comedy will suddenly introduce elements of horror into a story, which is probably why I love Woodland Critter Christmas so much, and I think here it was done super well. The initial scene of the ritual was genuinely creepy, and it made for one of the funniest moments from this episode in my opinion. I also think it's interesting how the girls just kind of go along with the satanic rituals seemingly without any purpose besides making a TikTok. Like none of them ever explain why they're actually doing the ritual. They're essentially driven into literal Satanism exclusively for TikTok clout, which is sadly not too far off from reality. I also really liked that Liu Kim played such a large role in this episode. He's always funny, and he ended up being a pretty appropriate choice to play the role of the company passing the tariff expenses off to the customer, considering his long history of bizarre business ventures. It was also nice to have Jesus play a leading role in an episode again. It's been a very long time since he's truly been one of the main focuses of an episode, and I thought he worked really well here, essentially playing the straight man to contrast just how absurd all of the Labubu demon worship stuff was. He had some pretty funny moments, and the parallels with this episode and season 1's Damien were definitely not lost on me. You know, Satan having a child and having an epic showdown with Jesus, I thought that was pretty cool. I thought Butters was also pretty great in this episode. Like I mentioned earlier, I love the random callback to his bush obsession, and I really enjoyed the similarities that this episode had with Raisins. Although one thing that is kind of different is that it seems like Red might actually like Butters, at least a little bit, but I mean, who knows? It definitely was set up to make it seem like she was just using him. And I didn't mention it earlier, but at the end of the episode when Jesus is talking to Butters and Red, Butters says this.
Yeah, I'm not having sex for a long time.
The reason I didn't mention it earlier is because I really didn't understand that line. Like, you didn't even have sex, why would you say that? But literally as I'm writing the script, I just realized that Butters still thinks they did have sex and that the whole satanic ritual thing is just how you have sex. And now that I understand that, that is actually a pretty hilarious line. Satan also played a big role in the episode, and for me personally, it will always be funny to have the devil play the role of a soft, sensitive, dejected lover trying to navigate a toxic relationship. That's a huge part of what made the South Park movie so great, and it's great here as well. And like I mentioned, the JD Vance scene was so funny to me. I know it's so stupid, he just looks funny, but it's that combined with his voice and the things he says. I don't know, dude. It's the funniest shit ever to me, and I don't know why. Now, having Satan be pregnant with Trump's baby definitely feels like it's setting up to be a large part of the rest of the season, and I'm pretty interested to see where they go with it. I wonder if they're gonna bring back Damien, since he was shown to be Satan's son back in season 1, and I think it would be pretty cool to see him again. And if you know anything about the modern South Park fandom, particularly the younger crowd, if they brought back Damien on top of the Mpreg stuff, certain subsets of the fandom will never shut up about it. Now, in terms of stuff I didn't like as much about this episode, the first thing you're probably expecting is the Fox Trump stuff. Now, I will say I didn't dislike this part of the episode. I found it mildly amusing. There just wasn't a lot of substance to it. For the most part, it was just the same gag of Fox fanboying over the fact that Trump is fucking Satan. The joke, of course, being that not only is he fucking Satan, but he's also fucking Satan. It seems like Matt and Trey are really into these wordplay jokes this season, and I don't mind them personally. It wasn't annoying or anything, it was just forgettable for the most part. But I actually think that almost played in its favor. In the last couple of episodes, it felt like the Trump stuff can sort of derail the main plot, but here I felt like it was just sort of there as a bit of filler to add on top of the main plot, which sounds like a bad thing, but in my opinion, I liked it better this way than when the Trump stuff just completely dominates like it has recently. And my last major complaint about this episode has to be, once again, the lack of the boys. I mean, I've said it in my last two videos, but it just continues to apply. I would love nothing more than a plot focused around the main boys. Now, don't get me wrong, this was still a solid episode all around, but like I've said, the boys are the core of this show. I mean, we're 4 episodes in, and Kyle has had literally 2 lines the entire season so far, and Stan hasn't had a major role either in any of the episodes. I'm still holding out hope that they're gonna go back to the boys at some point, because the boys are the reason that we all came to love South Park in the first place. But with that, that's pretty much everything I wanted to say about this episode. All around, it was solid and had a lot of funny moments. If I were ranking the episodes of the season, I'd probably put this one behind the first 2, but above the third one. It was good, and I'm hoping for something even better next. So I'll talk to you guys again in 2 weeks. So it's been a few weeks since the last episode of South Park, since Matt and Trey decided to delay the release of this episode for an extra week, citing the fact that they just didn't get it done in time. Now, this was pretty surprising to me, considering they've been making all of their episodes in 6 days for the past like 25 years, and in that time they only ever missed the deadline once due to a blackout at South Park Studios back in 2013. So to hear that they missed the deadline when they had a whole extra week to work was kind of weird to me. But it's okay, a delay really shouldn't change that much. I mean, how much could the current cultural landscape of the US really change in only a couple of weeks? Oh, wait. Yeah, so I saw many people speculating that they actually had to completely rework this episode following the death of Charlie Kirk, who they had just parodied only a few episodes ago, but personally, I don't think that's the case. It wouldn't have really made sense for them to be making another episode about him, considering he hadn't done anything super relevant since the episode was released. Not to mention the fact that the idea of South Park pulling punches at the risk of offending people is about as likely as Pip becoming my favorite character. But with the episode being delayed, I had plenty of time to wonder what their plan was with this whole situation. Were they going to talk about it? And if they did, what was their angle going to be? I mean, it's pretty tricky to try to make light of something so horrific so soon, but it wouldn't be the first time they had done it. But after finally watching the episode, it seems like they tried to avoid the topic altogether. Although, depending on who you ask, this episode might have been very relevant to that situation, considering they decided to take more than a few shots at Israel. It really felt like it was only a matter of time before they finally talked about it, so I'm glad to see that they finally did. But they actually tackled a pretty broad range of topics, including gambling apps, censorship, and the FCC. And obviously there was a Trump plotline, which I think we can expect from every episode of the season, but I think this episode did a really good job of moving away from the trap of just constantly dunking on Trump, and instead just allowing him to be his own character and not focusing on his real life actions. They're definitely setting up for some kind of major arc with Trump, Satan, and JD Vance, and if they continue with this attitude of their characters being only loosely tied to their real life counterparts, I think it would make for a great arc. And you know, I was thinking about these videos and I can't help but feel like they get a bit repetitive sometimes. I really don't think I'm that good at doing episode reviews, so to try to spice things up a little, I decided for the rest of the season I will write a short slam poetry verse about each episode, starting now. Nowadays, everyone's hooked on gambling, trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together, de-scrambling. Cartman defending the Jews, what could this mean? Kyle's mom is like the Karen Sydney Sweeney. Being a bitch is in her genes. The president is censoring again. The slippery slope is getting steep. He's the Roadrunner, and Brendan Carr is Wile E. Coyote. Meep meep. Vance wants to kill Satan's baby. He never wanted it at all. He should have taken his master's word and slipped the dude some Tylenol. Thank you. Okay, that was weird. Let's just talk about the episode. So the episode opens with a kid giving a presentation to the class about the Weebelows, which is basically an extension of the Cub Scouts that I assumed was made up for this episode, but as it turns out, it's actually a real thing. The boys are more interested in determining whether the speaker is a guy or a girl, and when they don't get their answer, they decide to gamble on it through peer-to-peer betting. This is in reference to platforms like Kalshi and Polymarket, which are basically the natural evolution of sports gambling, where you can place bets on real-world events. For example, right now I could go bet on who will win the next US presidential election, will there be a new variant of COVID this year, and most importantly, will Kai Cenat reach 1 million subs by the end of Mafiathon 3? Cartman and Stan are really into it, but Kyle isn't caught up, so Cartman gives him the rundown of the bets.
Will the girls' soccer team win on Friday? Will there be a snow day this month? Will Kyle's mom strike Gaza and destroy a Palestinian hospital?
Now, for those of you who don't know, Kyle's mom is essentially the OG Karen. She started a war with Canada, trying to get Terrence and Phillip taken off the air back in the movie, ruined the school Christmas play because she felt like it wasn't intrusive enough, and all around has a very long history of just being an overbearing, preachy woman. She hasn't really had any large roles in the show in a long time, so I definitely appreciated the fact that she was able to reprise her role as the town Karen.
Why the hell would my mom destroy a Palestinian hospital?
'Cause she's a Jew?
Fox News is reporting on these apps discussing how the most popular bet at the moment is what the gender of Satan and Trump's baby will be. We then cut to the White House, where my favorite character of the season, JD Vance, is delivering gifts for the baby to the president. He tells the president about how much his life is going to change after this baby, saying that he won't have time for any of his leisure activities. Upon hearing this, the president immediately realizes what needs to be done. He's not exactly subtle about it, and Satan immediately calls him out.
You want to get in a hot tub and smoke some cigarettes?
Do you want to get rid of the baby? I don't think your followers would be very happy if we got an abortion.
Meanwhile, Kyle is pissed about people betting on the Gaza situation, and Jimmy suggests that he talks to the people in charge. So Kyle gives a call to the strategic advisor for predictive markets, who happens to be one of the most haunting creatures the show has ever seen.
Hello?
He redirects him to the people who are actually in charge, the CFTC.
Hello?
But that's not the right place either, so he then redirects him once again to the FCC.
Hello?
This character is obviously supposed to represent Donald Trump Jr., and I really love his character design of being like half real picture, half cartoon. It is genuinely uncanny with him looking like something out of an analog horror series. But in real life, Donald Trump Jr. is the strategic advisor for several predictive markets, including Polymarket and Kalshi. Now, interestingly enough, Polymarket has been banned from operating in the US since 2022 up until recently. And by recently, I mean shortly after Donald Trump Jr. became their strategic advisor. Obviously, this raised some concern, with many citing a conflict of interest, considering the platform was unbanned after the son of the man who can decide the legality of these companies is now in charge of two of them. Now, to play a bit of devil's advocate here, it's not actually as simple as Trump Jr. is in charge now, so it's legal. Polymarket was actually set to begin operating in the US after buying a CFTC-approved exchange about a month before he became the head. But the CFTC is, of course, controlled by the current administration, and at that point, he was already in charge at Kalshi, so it definitely isn't the best optics. And this is what the show is making fun of, with Trump Jr. being in charge of the regulators and the regulators for the regulators. They're pointing out what they believe to be corruption. But Trump is busy setting up a Bugs Bunny-esque trap on the staircase to get rid of Satan's baby, but instead, the head of the FCC happens to walk in at just the wrong time.
No, Brendan Carr, no!
Whoa!
The boys are busy discussing how Kyle's crash out has caused the odds of Kyle's mom bombing Gaza to go up, and Cartman starts plotting on how they can manipulate the odds in their favor.
It's called a conflict of interest, you guys. It's a way to make free money. Isn't that illegal? Yes! All we have to do is make sure Kyle stays angry, and at the same time go talk anti-Semitic shit about his mom to goose the odds up even more.
Cartman is successful in his rage bait, and he goes around the school convincing everyone that she might actually do it to get those odds even higher. Meanwhile, Kyle's mom is eating with some of the other moms who successfully rage bait her into a frenzy about the Gaza situation, since, of course, all of them are betting as well.
It's not Jews versus Palestine, it's Israel versus Palestine!
What are you putting your money on?
I mean, it's a ridiculous bet, but she seems pretty pissed off.
The president then switches up his plan, this time making a delicious soup for Satan that is absolutely full of Plan B. Once again, it doesn't work, and once again, the head of the FCC just happens to wander in at a bad time.
Brendan Carr, don't do it!
It's funny how watching this show as much as I do, you begin to pick up on bits that they reuse over time. Because this is basically the exact same bit they did back in season 4 when Kenny's mom was pregnant and he didn't want a sibling, so he laced her drink with abortion pills only for his dad to drink it and have a very similar reaction. Also, the president clearly isn't very educated on contraceptives because Plan B isn't an abortion pill. It works by preventing the pregnancy in the first place by delaying ovulation. So taking it after you're already pregnant wouldn't even do anything. See, this is actually an educational channel. Kyle's mom is ranting to her family about how Jews as a whole are being associated with Israel's actions. She gets so angry that even her own family is beginning to question what she'll do, with Ike sneaking in a quick bet that she will strike Gaza.
I'm going to find out where all this is coming from, and I'm going to give them a piece of my mind!
The adorable JD brings an adorable cat to the president as another gift for the baby, where he explains to the president how cats can actually be dangerous to a pregnancy due to being carriers of toxoplasmosis, which is a parasite that can cause a lot of complications in pregnancy if the mother is infected. And interestingly, this is actually the second time I've talked about toxoplasmosis on this channel, because I have a whole video where I talk about zombie parasites, and toxo has been shown to potentially have some insane effects in humans. Check out that video if you're interested. So the president immediately gets to work setting up a trap for Satan that would cover him in cat litter, but of course it doesn't work, and the head of the FCC shows up at a rather inopportune time.
Brendan Carr!
Cartman is bragging about the fact that his rage bait got the odds all the way up to a 95% chance that Kyle's mom will strike Gaza, only for him to bet $1,400 that she won't. But just then, Jimmy comes to announce some bad news.
Kyle's mom's in Israel!
Cartman immediately switches his tune and tells Kyle that he cannot allow his mother to do anything. Kyle then makes a call to the government of Israel, giving me probably my favorite joke from the episode.
Hello?
Meanwhile, Brendan Carr is in the hospital where he learns that he has toxoplasmosis. The doctor explains to JD Vance what this might mean for him.
If the toxoplasmosis parasite gets to his brain, I'm afraid he may lose his freedom of speech.
Yeah, South Park has never been known for their subtlety. But this is when we get the twist reveal that JD Vance has been the one pulling the strings this whole time, subtly planting these ideas into the president's head about getting rid of the baby since he's next in line to be president and a baby might get in the way of that. He remarks that if Carr keeps getting in the way of his plans, things might not go so well for him.
We can do this the easy way, or we can do it the hard way.
This was one of my favorite parts of the episode, and with it, I can finally give the context that I've been holding back on this whole time. So following the assassination of Charlie Kirk, Jimmy Kimmel made a claim on his show that MAGA supporters were, quote, desperately trying to characterize this kid who murdered him as anything other than one of them. He then segued this into making fun of Donald Trump for seemingly not actually caring about Kirk. Now, I have a lot of thoughts on this topic, and being that I'm a guy who makes a living talking about a cartoon on the internet, I'm sure you are all dying to hear my thoughts on politics. So let's talk about it. Now, first of all, the implication that the shooter was MAGA is just objectively wrong, and I don't think anyone really even thought that was the case. Most of the discourse I saw about this situation surrounded whether he was a radical leftist or a radical far-right like Nick Fuentes type guy, so the idea that this was a MAGA guy is pretty obviously not true. But shortly after this, ABC announced that Jimmy Kimmel's show would be suspended indefinitely, following remarks from the FCC chairman Brendan Carr, in which he mentioned that he found Jimmy Kimmel's comments disgusting, ABC's broadcasting license is granted to them by the FCC, and immediately followed that up by saying, quote, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Now, to some, this may seem like a threat directly to ABC from the people who hold the power to revoke their broadcasting license. It certainly seems like ABC felt this way considering their decision to immediately suspend Kimmel after this statement. And this situation seems pretty familiar considering Stephen Colbert's firing a couple months ago after his comments about Donald Trump. Now, let me be clear. I think that both Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are some of the most unfunny, cringeworthy comedians on TV. I think I'd rather watch A Little Late with Lily Singh than either of their shows. And if ABC had just decided to remove Kimmel themselves without these statements from Carr, they are perfectly within their rights to do so, being a private company. The problem is, when the federal government is coming out and seemingly threatening to revoke a company's broadcasting license because they said something they didn't like, to me, that is a blatant attempt at removing someone's freedom of speech. You don't have to like what he said. I don't like what he said. But this country is founded on freedom of speech, which means the federal government cannot control what you say. What he said may have been factually incorrect, but that's not illegal. If you couldn't lie on TV, CNN and Fox News would have been taken down a long time ago. And if you know anything about South Park, the one hill that they are willing to die on is freedom of speech. This whole Brendan Carr Looney Tunes subplot with the president is them making the point that the FCC is complacent in the president's attempts to silence the people he doesn't agree with Trump just bitching Carr around and humiliating him by forcing him to do his bidding. And all of this censorship can only lead to one outcome.
I'm afraid he may lose his freedom of speech.
Oh yeah, and the way his arm is positioned in this scene definitely doesn't seem like an accident. Now, of course, people are going to try to say this was a financial decision by ABC and it had nothing to do with Carr's comments, but considering ABC decided to reinstate Kimmel after they lost nearly $5 billion in stocks, it's pretty clear that it was never business motivated. Carr himself even tried to come out and say that he wasn't trying to threaten them, but if you watch the clip where he says it, it is incredibly obvious that's exactly what he meant, especially considering he prefaced his statement by saying that the FCC is the one that gives ABC their broadcasting license.
And they have a license granted by us at the FCC, and that comes with it an obligation to operate in the public interest. And we can get into some ways that we've been trying to reinvigorate the public interest and some changes that we've seen. But frankly, when you see stuff like this, I mean, look, we can do this the easy way or the hard way.
And not to mention the fact that when the president gets on Truth Social and shares his anger with Kimmel being reinstated, threatening to sue the company, it just goes to show what all of this was really about. Anyways, enough of the ranting, let's finish up this episode. I was a huge fan of the twist that JD Vance was the villain lurking in the shadows this whole time. I already loved his design so much, and his evil face is really just the cherry on top. Although I do find it a little odd that he's so against the coming of the Antichrist, considering his ties to Peter Thiel, but that's a topic for another day. But Cartman's quest to get the bet removed ends up being successful, which means that his $1,400 is safe. He has a chat with Kyle about it, who reveals that he knew that his mom never actually planned to strike Gaza. We then cut to Kyle's mom giving Netanyahu a stern talking to as the credits roll.
There you are, Mr. Netanyahu! Killing thousands and flattening neighborhoods, then wrapping yourself in Judaism like it's some shield from criticism. You're making life for Jews miserable and life for American Jews impossible.
So now let's talk about my feelings on this episode as a whole. In my opinion, this might have been the best episode of the season so far. It felt very cohesive in a way that the other episodes haven't. I feel like the other episodes of the season have had trouble tying the plots together in a way that makes sense, considering their insistence to continue with the Trump plotline. It definitely felt like the Trump stuff kind of derailed those plots sometimes, but here I think it was integrated super well. Also, I really liked that it wasn't insistent on just making fun of the stuff Trump is doing. It definitely feels like they're moving towards a more original storyline for Trump, and it is incredibly refreshing to not just see them rip on him for whatever he's doing in the news this week. Now, don't get me wrong, obviously they still kinda did that, they still criticized him, but it was much more focused on the FCC's willingness to follow his orders rather than Trump himself. I also thought they did a great job handling the topic of Israel and Palestine, making a point to make the clear distinction between Jewish people and the actions of Israel, while simultaneously not going easy on Israel at all. I thought it was super smart to use Kyle's mom as the focus for the episode, considering her previous history of going to some extreme lengths to get her way. At a certain point in the episode, you begin to wonder if maybe she actually will strike Gaza. And of course, the fact that by the end, Cartman is actually fighting against anti-Semitism because he's afraid he might lose his bet, only for him to find out that he actually would have won his bet if he hadn't gotten it removed. It was just textbook Cartman, and it worked incredibly well. Speaking of Cartman, we finally got an episode that focused on the boys. It was exactly what I've been waiting for this entire season, and I was so happy to finally see Kyle play a large part in the episode. A Kyle Cartman episode is a formula that is pretty hard to mess up in my opinion, and the episode proved how great it can be when done correctly. I also really liked the emphasis on the prediction market gambling, because it was kind of the glue that held all the different plot lines together. And of course, I have to mention how great the twist reveal of evil JD Vance was. Obviously, I already really liked his character just because his design and voice were funny, but with this reveal, they've really added another dimension to his character and seem to be preparing for something big, and I'm stoked to see where they go with it. All around, this was a really great episode. They had a lot of things to say, and they somehow managed to fit it all into one episode without it feeling disjointed. Honestly, this one felt the most reminiscent of classic South Park out of anything they've made in a long time. It was cohesive, topical, biting, concise, and most importantly, really funny. I really don't have any complaints about this episode. Everything was done super well. My only complaint is that we're gonna have to wait another 3 weeks before the next episode, which sucks, but honestly, if it means keeping up this level of quality, I am more than happy to wait. So that's it. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Alright, so new South Park just dropped. I am currently very ill. I wasn't planning on making a video, but you know, being the South Park guy, I kinda have to. So quick update on the previous video I made. It actually got taken down due to copyright by Paramount, which is the first time in a very long time I've had a video straight up blocked due to copyright. Normally they just end up taking my revenue from it, but I've currently disputed this copyright claim, which means that it's gonna be back up until they decide what they're gonna do. Oddly enough, my boy Slush also got his video taken down on the same episode, so I'm sure you could link this to some grand conspiracy, but I really don't care. But anyways, new South Park, let's talk about it. So normally I write like a whole script for my videos, but due to my illness, I don't really feel like doing that right now, so this one's just coming off the dome, we're freestyling it. So the first thing I noticed about this episode is the fact that it's labeled as Season 28, Episode 1, instead of Season 27, Episode 6. I thought this was a bug at first with the broadcasting, but no, on Paramount Plus it says this is Season 28, Episode 1. People have speculated that the reason they've jumped to another season is to make up for last year's season that they didn't have. That doesn't really make sense to me because you're getting the same amount of episodes either way, so I don't know about that. For whatever reason, it seems like they're going with 2 5-episode seasons back to back. I have no clue why, but I guess welcome to Season 28, everyone. We're done with Season 27. Hey, it's Editor Blooms here. I'm currently losing my mind because I think I just realized why they decided to skip to Season 28. I genuinely think the reason they decided to skip to Season 28 instead of finishing Season 27 is because the next episodes would be Episodes 6 and 7. I know that sounds kind of insane, but we don't have any explanation, and it would not surprise me at all if that was totally an intentional joke they made. Anyways, back to the video. And we're opening Season 28 with an absolute bang as they go after the 6-7 meme. Now, the 6-7 meme is something I would have no clue how to explain to anyone above the age of like 15. It's just kind of one of those if you know kind of things. It's just like wrapped in 18 different layers of irony, and it's totally incomprehensible to anyone that hasn't been following the meme since its inception. And luckily, the episode doesn't even try to explain it at all, because it's pretty obvious that Matt and Trey have no clue what it means. And I think that's for the best, because instead of trying to explain it, they just use it as like this weird satanic ritual to bring about the Antichrist. After I saw this teaser, I made a joke on Twitter about how they need to get Trey's daughter out of the writer's room, which obviously was just a joke, but it is pretty funny to try to imagine her explaining this to Trey and him just being completely dumbfounded by it. But the whole 6-7 thing was really just a minor plot point. The biggest focus of this episode was actually on Christianity. Specifically, it targets this new brand of like MAGA Christianity that seems to be pretty far removed from any actual Christian values. And because of Satan being pregnant and the coming of the Antichrist, they end up inviting an expert on the topic to the town, this being Peter Thiel. And what's funny is I actually predicted this in my last video. Although I do find it a little odd that he's so against the coming of the Antichrist, considering his ties to Peter Thiel, but that's a topic for another day. I don't really know how to feel about this episode yet. Watching it on all kinds of cold medicine definitely didn't help with my viewing experience. It really kind of felt like a fever dream. But enough of the intro, let's just get into it. The episode opens with Butters going around doing the 6-7 thing to all the people in the school, and everyone finds it absolutely hilarious. PC Principal, now known as Power Christian Principal, begins to think that all the 6-7 is some satanic numerology stuff, so of course he invites the expert on the Antichrist to come talk to the school.
Peter Thiel knows about the Antichrist. Peter Thiel knows about the Antichrist. Let's learn about the Antichrist today.
I love how they give him a little catchy jingle every time he comes on screen. It reminded me a lot of the James Cameron jingle from back in season 16. Now, if you don't know who Peter Thiel is, he's basically a billionaire who's helped start a bunch of different companies, specifically Palantir. I'm not going to go into depth about what Palantir is specifically because it's its own rabbit hole, but essentially it's a mass surveillance company that uses AI to correlate data it's collected, and the objective is to use this AI to better understand and predict crime. It's essentially the most intrusive form of mass surveillance we have ever seen, and they have a lot of connections to things like the CIA and the White House, considering their connection to JD Vance. Again, I'm not going to go too deep into it, but this is a huge rabbit hole, and I definitely encourage you to look into it. But one odd quirk of Peter Thiel specifically is that he seems to be very interested in the Antichrist. In fact, he has gone out of his way to give entire private lectures about the Antichrist, which is kind of weird.
It's so strange to have this, you build military AI, military drone, autonomous drone technology to export to war zones all over the world. You build domestic surveillance technology to surveil our friends and neighbors. And then your other pet passion is the Antichrist. It's odd.
Thiel explains to the students that the reason the Antichrist is coming now is because Trump's penis was small enough to fit inside of Satan, which is kind of a funny way to make that like an actual plot point instead of just throwaway joke. So meanwhile, Trump's at the White House jerking off with a pair of tweezers, which, despite how dumb that is, I thought it was kind of funny, when JD Vance interrupts him to tell him that they've shut down another abortion clinic, but he also reminds him that there is one more abortion clinic that's still open. Now, we learned in the previous episode that JD Vance is actually pulling all the strings and he wants Trump to get rid of the baby. So obviously this is his way of suggesting he goes and gets an abortion. Jesus has a talk with PC Principal and comes to realize that his idea of Christianity isn't super aligned with what Christ actually taught.
What branch of Christianity are you?
The kind that loves his country and doesn't tolerate any fucking fags.
Yeah, see, I really think I don't belong here.
He also mentions that the vice principal, Strong Woman, has converted to his form of Christianity, and we get our first look at what that means. It's interesting because as PC Principal became Power Christian Principal, one of the first questions I had was, how does Strong Woman feel about this? So it is nice to finally see how she feels about it and that she's now aligned with PC Principal, but I do kind of wish they had shown more of the steps it took to get to this point, because it's like kind of Strong Woman's whole thing that she's very stubborn and isn't going to do something just because she's told to do it. Whereas it was very believable that PC Principal could be swayed in his beliefs, it wasn't as believable for Strong Woman. So I definitely would have liked to see them expand on this a little bit and show more of the process of her becoming this modern day Christian. Meanwhile, Cartman has begun laughing so hard at the 6-7 meme that he just throws up every time he hears it. And this isn't important now, but it'll come more into play later. PC Principal invites Jesus on a double date with a good Christian woman, and it just becomes more obvious to Jesus that these modern day MAGA Christian people are just not really for him.
So I just started reading the
Bible, you know? I mean, I didn't actually read the Bible, but I listened to a lot of podcasts.
So Trump goes to the abortion clinic to try to convince the doctor to sneak into his room and give Satan an abortion. But of course he refuses, citing the fact that he wouldn't even know how to do an abortion on the Antichrist.
To do that, you need some kind of expert on the Antichrist.
Peter Thiel explains to the teachers that all the students are involved in this satanic cult involving the numbers 6 and 7, and in order to help them, he just needs all of their data. Mr. Adler sees exactly what he's trying to do here and points it out for the rest of the teachers.
Freely handing people's personal data over to some tech billionaire preaching shit about the Bible?
PC Principal then accuses him of having a problem with Christianity and beats the crap out of him for it. Now, the message here is not very subtle, obviously showing how people like Peter Thiel and even this administration are weaponizing Christianity in order to justify their actions as we move closer and closer to a full-blown authoritarian police state. This is made even more obvious as Peter Thiel goes through all the school security cams and tries to make these insane conclusions from them.
2 girls doing the same thing.
Wait, why is there a camera inside the girl's bathroom?
To stop the Antichrist.
So as soon as Jesus and PC Principal leave, Peter Thiel gives a call to JD Vance, who explains to him that he'll have access to all of the data he could ever want as long as this baby isn't born. Now, of course, this isn't related to the real world in any way. This is totally fictional. But on an unrelated note, did you know that JD Vance and Peter Thiel are actually really good friends? In fact, it's been alleged that Peter Thiel essentially groomed JD Vance into becoming a venture capitalist and later a politician. And despite JD Vance being an outspoken critic of Trump at the time, Peter Thiel actually went out of his way to take JD Vance to Mar-a-Lago and smooth things out with Trump. And on top of this, Peter Thiel actually recruited a bunch of venture capitalists to help fund JD Vance's political career, on top of his own donations, which included a $15 million donation, which is the largest amount of money donated to a single Senate candidate ever. So this has led some to speculate that maybe the dude who runs the mass surveillance company has some ulterior motives in getting someone elected to presidency. Now, of course, I would never say that personally, but some might. Anyways, JD Vance gives another call to Peter Thiel once he's back at the White House and says a line that, again, has nothing to do with anything in the real world.
When I become president, I will give you full access to everyone's data.
So Peter Thiel is going to Cartman's house because he's been vomiting nonstop every time 6-7 is mentioned, and he still believes that 6-7 is somehow tied to the Antichrist and demonic possession. When he arrives, we get this foggy exterior shot of Cartman's house with him walking up to the door, and it's very obvious that this is a parody of The Exorcist. The parody continues as Thiel meets Cartman, and he decides to test just how far gone he is.
Would you like to know how long it took me to get here?
How long?
Around 6 or 7 minutes, I'm not...
Meanwhile, Jesus is on another double date with PC Principal, and he's getting really fed up with this whole MAGA Christianity thing.
You know, they're all just a bunch of libtards anyways. I know what's up. I listen to podcasts. You want to know who I think the Antichrist is? Greta Thunberg.
PC Principal follows him to the bathroom and begins to accuse him of not liking Christianity or having a problem with it. And Jesus explains to him what his real problems are with this movement.
Look, I don't know what you think Christianity is, but it has nothing to do with that. You need a way to bully people, and you're using the Bible to do it.
Of course, this leads to PC Principal then beating up Jesus, which is, again, a not-so-subtle commentary on how far removed these people's beliefs actually are from that of Christ, to the point where PC Principal is literally beating up Jesus. Meanwhile, Peter Thiel is still attempting to exorcise Cartman, but he doesn't get anywhere, and he tells Leanne that he has to take Cartman to DC. We then cut back to Jesus sadly walking through the streets as he tries to reconcile what Christianity has become, but in the end, he decides to return to the restaurant and grab his Christian woman, and he fully embraces what it really means to be a modern Christian. Now, this definitely surprised me because personally, I didn't expect Jesus to give in to PC Principal's new Christianity, and at this point, I don't really understand why he even did, because this is where the episode ends. So realistically, I think they're going to pick up these plots in the next episode and continue with a more serialized story. And I'm sure during the story, they're going to explain why Jesus made this decision and what that actually means. They also left Peter Thiel's story on a cliffhanger with him saying that he needs to take Cartman to DC. So to me, it definitely seems like they've planned out some kind of overarching storyline that they will follow in the next couple of episodes. So now let's go ahead and talk about the things I liked and didn't like about this episode. So like I said at the beginning, I really do not know how to feel about this episode. One thing they continued from the previous episode that I appreciated in that episode was the fact that the Trump and Satan plotline was very minimal in the episode. I think at this point they've kind of found the perfect amount of Trump and Satan to be in the episode without it just becoming super annoying and overdone. And again, I think that just lends itself to these plots because they're funnier when they're not overdone. And I think in this case it was still pretty funny with him continuing his quest to get an abortion for Satan. I also ended up really enjoying the Jesus and PC principle plotline that played out. Having Jesus be at odds with this new brand of Christianity was a pretty funny way to show just how far removed this MAGA Christianity is from anything Jesus believed or taught. And I really like how they tied that idea into how the government and Peter Thiel are using this form of Christianity as a tool. Peter Thiel specifically positioning himself to say, guys, we should totally be worried about the Antichrist. Who knows when it's going to come? But don't worry, I'm on your side and I'm here to protect you. And all you have to do to have that protection is give up all of your freedom and liberty. It's a tale as old as time, convincing people that giving up their freedom and privacy is totally worth it as long as they're safe. And using Christianity to fearmonger about the coming of the Antichrist is a very effective way to get people to buy into whatever you're selling. And in this case, that is a totalitarian surveillance state. And I did really enjoy that they made fun of Peter Thiel in this episode. I thought they did a great job with it. Specifically, I really loved the Exorcist parody at the end. I honestly think that was probably the highlight of the episode for me. And of course, Peter Thiel's theme song was incredibly catchy. Now, honestly, there wasn't much I specifically disliked about this episode. Obviously, the 6-7 stuff was just kind of cringe, but I mean, I thought they executed it in a way that was probably the least cringy it could be, because like I said, they didn't even try to understand what it actually means. In fact, the mystery of what it means becomes a plot point in itself as everyone thinks it has something to do with the Antichrist. I also didn't really like the ending very much because, as I mentioned, it doesn't really make sense for Jesus to all of a sudden just switch to this new MAGA Christianity. But like I said, this is definitely setting up to be a multi-part overarching storyline that's probably going to be explained eventually. So until then, I can't really be too upset at the ending. But that's pretty much all I have to say about this episode. I'm going to go take a nap because I'm sick and tired. Probably going to take like a 6 or 7 hour long nap. I don't know, but I'll see you all again when the next episode comes out. Alright, so last video I was very sick and I wasn't exactly in the best frame of mind to be making a video, so because of that video sucked, and to make up for it, I'm gonna go all out for this one. Check out this cool editing effect. That's the kind of stuff you can expect from this video moving forward. High octane, balls to the wall action while we talk about this new South Park episode. That's right, I'm in my element, nothing's gonna stop me. Oh. Well, that might just stop me. So remember in that last video how I mentioned that my video covering the episode where they made fun of Israel got taken down? Well, I was in the process of disputing that claim, waiting for it to be reinstated, when all of a sudden I got a second copyright claim on the video, once again from Paramount, but this time was different, because this wasn't just a claim, this was a copyright strike, meaning that not only was that video immediately taken off of YouTube, but I received a strike on my YouTube channel for it. This is kind of a big deal, because if you get 3 strikes on your channel is gone, terminated. So the fact that I received a strike with no prior warnings was slightly unsettling to say the least. Maybe this was Paramount's attempt at getting me in the Halloween spirit, you know, give me a little scare. But what was especially odd about this is that fellow YouTuber and friend of the channel Slush had a nearly identical experience with his video on the same episode a few days before me. It was also copyright claimed, which he appealed, and while waiting on the appeal, his video was removed and received a strike from a separate copyright claim entirely. So both of our videos on this same episode of South Park received copyright claims and strikes separately within a few days of each other. Even more odd was that the strike we both received seemed to be from a different source than the original claim. You see, the first claim we got, along with pretty much any of the claims I've gotten in the past, the claimant was listed as Paramount Global. But when we got the strike, it was only listed as Paramount. A slight inconsistency, but it's nothing super weird. But what was interesting was that we both were given the option to contact the claimant, and the email for the claimant ended in videosites.com. So I took a look into this company, and basically what they do is they use AI to detect potential piracy for big companies like Paramount and Warner Brothers. Unfortunately, AI is not able to detect fair use and instead just detects that we're using clips from the episode and thinks we're trying to re-upload the episode. So it's not really a surprise that it falsely flagged our videos. But what is weird is that Slush and I both only received strikes for our videos on that episode in particular. We've both made videos since then and before that have pretty much the same amount of clips in them, and yet there's no issues with those. Why didn't the AI claim those videos too? I mean, what could be in these 2 videos that makes them more worthy of being taken down than the other ones? So when I was looking into this company, I just happened to stumble across where they operate out of, and I mean, come on. I mean, that is just objectively hilarious. Net and Ya Israel? I mean, you literally couldn't write this stuff. Now, do I think this was actually done maliciously to try to censor our videos? No. I genuinely think that this was probably a weird coincidence. I mean, I'm sure this company takes down hundreds, if not thousands of videos a day that are completely unrelated to that topic. And before a bunch of dumbasses in the comments start posting juice box emojis and trying to blame an entire group of people for something, just remember, even if there was malicious intent behind this, which I seriously doubt, there is a very big difference between an entire race of people and the actions of very powerful people with an agenda, and if you cannot tell the difference, you're a dumbass. Anyways, I just thought this was too funny not to mention, and more importantly, wanted to explain why you might see me take some extra precautions from now on to avoid the AI copyright detection stuff, which will include less footage from the show in general and potentially some weird edits to any of the footage I do end up using. So hopefully the strike gets cleared up soon. If you don't know, the company has 10 days to show proof that they are taking legal action against us or the strike is removed. So either the video will be back up in about a week, or you'll see me shilling my brand new Blooms coin to help pay for my legal team. And speaking of cryptocurrency, how about we actually talk about the new episode of South Park that came out? Like I said, I'm going to be testing out some new methods to try to avoid copyright, so let me know how you guys feel about it in the comments. So really short intro since I just spent like 4 minutes talking about something completely unrelated. This episode was a Halloween special. It released Friday night on Halloween instead of their usual Wednesday, which I think might be the first time they've ever not released on Wednesday, but I don't know. The episode was pretty decent. I would say it was around the middle of the pack of this season in terms of quality. Well, technically we're in season 28 now for some reason, but you know what I mean. One of the major plot points was Stan having this meta self-reflection on the state of the show, which I thought was pretty entertaining. Of course, there was a heavy focus on the White House and this administration, though they're continuing with this theme of focusing on making fun of those around the president rather than the president himself, and all around it was an entertaining episode that had a lot of stuff I liked about it, but it didn't feel super cohesive, and in terms of actually moving the plot forward they've been setting up this whole season, it felt pretty weak. Entertaining, but not one of the best of the season. I definitely have mixed feelings on this one, so enough of this, let's get into it. Oh yeah, I didn't do my slam poetry verse for the last video because I was sick, and you guys loved it the first time, so let me make up for that now. 250 million on the White House while most of the country can't afford rent. It's okay, just buy this cryptocurrency and you'll get rich. Man, I would have been better off doing Fent. South Park sucks now, I proclaim, brushing tears from my eyes. You're right, say Matt and Trey. They think the show sucks, they admit it in Kyle's monologue. They can't believe it's come to this. They're feeling trapped and shocked. Hassan's dog. The episode opens with Stan and Randy talking in the car, where we find out that ever since they moved out of Tegrity Farms 4 episodes ago, the Marsh family has been homeless. This was a pretty funny way to open the episode since they just drop it on us out of nowhere. Like, nothing in the last few episodes has indicated this, and I think we all just expected them to move back into their old house. But no, Randy explains that he can't get his geology job back due to the government shutdown, and they can't afford to buy a house either, so instead they're moving in with Grandpa Marsh, who lives in a nursing home.
Can't make me stay here. This is completely inhumane.
That's what I said. Didn't work.
At the White House, the president is busy tearing down the East Wing for his new ballroom, a reference to the fact that our president is currently spending $250 million to do exactly that during this government shutdown, which honestly kind of feels like one big analogy for the state of this country as a whole. But he's interrupted by Dan Scavino and Pam Bondi, who tell him that they think someone is trying to stop his baby from being born. Pam Bondi reminds Trump of how great he is with a mysterious brown stain on her nose, showing once again that subtlety has never been South Park's strong suit. Now, a couple episodes ago, we learned that JD Vance is working with Peter Thiel to try to get rid of this baby so that he's next in line for the presidency. So he gives Peter Thiel a call to let him know that they're onto them, and even in his sedated state, Cartman can't help himself.
It should last another 6-7 hours.
Now, from the last episode, Peter Thiel was meant to be taking Cartman to DC to exorcise this 6-7 demon thing out of him, but this scene is the only reference to that plot we get in this episode, so it seems like they're putting that on pause for the time being. Kenny and Kyle visit Stan at the retirement home, where we get a very interesting conversation between the boys.
The truth is, I think a lot of people are just afraid to admit that South Park sucks now. Yeah, everyone knows it. South Park sucks now. And it's because of all this political shit.
Now, obviously, this conversation is a reflection from Matt and Trey on the current state of the show and how people seem to be feeling about it in general. The idea that South Park sucks now is a very common sentiment I've seen shared in my comment sections and all over social media. The truth is that a lot of people aren't enjoying the way this season is focused so heavily on politics, to the point where I don't blame people for saying it feels like a completely different show. And obviously, Matt and Trey are aware of these criticisms. In fact, it even seems like they know why people feel this way, with Stan specifically mentioning the lack of storylines focused on the boys.
Remember when we used to do stuff? Just us guys? Ever since all this political crap took over, it's like, what? Like what happened to us?
I mean, this is pretty much word for word one of the main criticisms I've made in almost all of my videos about this season. And of course, I'm not alone on this. A lot of fans have been feeling this exact same way. And even though I don't think this season sucks in the way a lot of fans do, I can still recognize that they've kind of fallen into the same trap they did back in season 20, and it just doesn't feel as much like South Park. It's interesting to see Matt and Trey reflect on this in real time and not just dismiss this criticism as a whole, instead acknowledging why it is that people are starting to feel this way. One thing that has always been true of Matt and Trey is that they are very self-aware. They stay tapped into how people are feeling about the things they make, and they know why people feel the way they do. But another thing that's always been true about Matt and Trey is that they're gonna make whatever they want to make regardless of how people feel about it. I mean, that's kind of the whole philosophy of the show. If they think it's funny, it's a part of the show, even if it means pissing off their entire fan base in the process. And in many cases, they've relished in pissing off their entire fan base because to them, that's even funnier than any of the jokes they could make in the show. So the boys decide to start their own online community to find like-minded individuals who think South Park sucks now, and overnight the community gains over 700,000 members. So now, with a massive community behind them, of course, they immediately move into the natural next step when you've developed a large following online.
Introducing the South Park Sucks Now cryptocurrency coin.
Unsurprisingly, Kyle isn't a big fan of making a meme coin since they made the community to try to start a movement to make South Park better, and Stan just seems more interested in profiting from it. So they hop on a call with their financial advisor, who happens to be someone we haven't seen in a long time. It's Kyle's cousin, Kyle. He played a large role in the Fractured But Whole video game in 2017, but in the show itself, he hasn't made an appearance since The Losing Edge, which came out 20 years ago. Now, if you aren't familiar with his character, his entire purpose is to be the representation of just about every Jewish stereotype in the book, so of course he's their financial advisor.
This isn't about a coin, it's about a movement. Yeah, that's some savvy jujitsu right there.
Personally, I love cousin Kyle and how he is so incredibly annoying to everyone around him, so it was nice to see him make an appearance after such a long time. Now, the boys making a meme coin is obviously in reference to how crypto is so unregulated that 99% of the market is made up of scammers and incredibly rich people, but specifically the current administration also has some shady ties to crypto. For example, the Trump family making over $800 million on crypto in 2025 alone, Donald Trump literally launching and endorsing his own meme coin as president of the United States, which was totally not a pump and dump, and of course the fact that Trump randomly decided to pardon the Binance CEO who was arrested on money laundering charges. Binance, of course, having ties to World Liberty Financial, a company co-founded by Trump's sons, which sends 75% of token sales revenue to a company linked to their family. Now, some people may call this blatant corruption, but personally, I see it as savvy investing.
Yeah, that's some savvy jujitsu right there.
So while all this is going on, the president is discussing how he thinks that the White House might be haunted as he keeps seeing this ominous figure stalking the halls.
It's here right now.
Pretty sure that's your wife, sir.
He can't seem to escape this creature, and eventually he decides to hire some paranormal investigators to get to the bottom of it. The White House is looking extra spooky, and Stephen Miller plays the role of the ghoulish butler from every haunted house movie ever. The investigators decide to take a look at the contents of the mysterious brown substance that keeps appearing on Pam Bondi's nose when they discover something they didn't expect.
It seems to be 54% filet-o-fish sandwich.
I ate a filet-o-fish sandwich last night.
28% Taco Bell.
I ate Taco Bell this morning.
And it's 14% its own cum.
I ate.
The investigators are immediately arrested and charged for falsifying reports and creating fake news. Stan is discussing their plans for the crypto rug pull with cousin Kyle, who is currently on his way to DC to get approval for it from Donald Trump Jr. Kyle has had enough of all of this and he walks out on the plan. Cousin Kyle makes it to the extra spooky White House where he meets with Don Jr. This is interrupted by a mandatory seance. Everyone is at the seance, including Don Jr., Kristi Noem, and Brendan Carr, who were all characters in previous episodes of the season. Pam ends up getting possessed by the spirit, and Trump eagerly talks to it, trying to get some answers.
I want to hear what it has to say.
Epstein!
No, you're right. Let's stop this.
The seance quickly devolves into chaos, and it's truly a horror show. I actually think this scene might be my favorite from the episode, as all of these characters they've had throughout the season work incredibly well as monsters from a horror movie. Kristi Noem and her melting face, Brendan Carr shambling around like a zombie, and Don Jr. just looking like that. And of course, Melania just standing completely still in the corner with the giant hat covering her face. It's genuinely a pretty creepy character design, and when you put them all together like this, it really is perfect for a house of horrors. It felt very natural and made sense considering most of these characters were established weeks or months ago. It works super well, and I definitely appreciated it. Cousin Kyle gets freaked out and admits that the entire crypto market is essentially a money laundering scam for rich people, which immediately leads to him being arrested and charged for fraud.
Filed by Pam Bondi, who said, "We will continue to indict anyone who says bad stuff about our amazing president."
We get one more scene where Stan is talking to Kyle about how South Park sucks and things will never go back to normal. Kyle responds with a line that seems like Matt and Trey talking directly to the audience, perhaps to give them a bit of hope.
Things will get back, Stan. I know it's hard to see right now, but things will go back to normal. And in the meantime, we just have to make the most of where we are.
The episode ends with Stan trying to enjoy his time at the retirement home and Melania ominously standing in the window of the White House, while If I Didn't Care by the Ink Spots plays in the background. Genuinely a pretty haunting end to the episode, so now let's talk about that ending a little bit as well as theorize on where the show goes from here. So that ending conversation between Kyle and Stan definitely felt to me like Matt and Trey speaking to the audience, essentially telling us that the show is going to go back to how it was, but at this point they're too deep into the storyline to just move on, so they're going to see it through to the end and try to make the best of it. So let's talk about what exactly that means. And once again, even though it's technically 2 seasons, I'm just going to talk about it like it's one because it's just one continuous storyline. So this was the 7th episode of the season, and assuming this season ends in 10 episodes, which was the pattern before the Paramount deal, it seems like these next 3 episodes will be sort of the grand finale to this story, and most likely they'll essentially act as one 3-part episode. I say this because in the past where they've had these semi-serialized seasons like season 18 and 19, the last 2 or 3 episodes of both of those were essentially one big episode used to wrap up all the loose ends from the rest of the season. And for this season, there are a lot of loose ends. Cartman and Peter Thiel, Satan's pregnancy, JD Vance's plan to stop it all, Towley overhearing his plan, Jesus becoming a MAGA Christian, Randy leaving Tegrity, hell, even Mr. Mackey's plot from episode 2 seems unfinished. They really have set up a ton of different plot elements in this season that are just waiting to be concluded, and I think if they plan on making a satisfying ending for each of them, they're gonna need all 3 episodes to do it. And if they are able to pull it off and really make all of them have satisfying conclusions, it could be something really special. Now, that's a big if, because I can't imagine it'll be easy to make a cohesive story out of all these separate elements, but if they do manage to do it, it could make for one of the best season finales we've seen from the show. In my opinion, season 19's finale was the best they've done with this kind of setup, and in that case, they had significantly less story elements than they do now, so it's gonna take a lot to pull this off successfully. But either way, based on Stan and Kyle's conversation, it seems like they plan on completely moving past this once it's over, which I think will be a win for everyone. But let's finish talking about this episode for now and wrap this video up. Like I said at the beginning, I thought this was a good episode. It had a few jokes that I really appreciated. The main downside was that it felt like it kind of stalled the story out a little bit. Based on my assumption about the finale spanning the next 3 episodes, I think that was intentional because they already had pretty much everything set up they wanted to before this episode, and they didn't want to change anything major in this one, so they just tried to focus on a self-contained story, which felt kind of out of place amongst the rest of the season. But I definitely still enjoyed it. I liked the self-reflection on the part of Matt and Trey, and that they were willing to basically tell us what their plan was moving forward. I thought it worked super well as a Halloween episode. Like I said, I couldn't believe how perfectly all the characters fit into this haunted house parody, and for me, that was probably the highlight of the episode. And of course, I was excited that they brought back Cousin Kyle, only for him to be arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. So all in all, it was a pretty decent episode. Again, I don't think it was the best from the season by any means, but it's around the middle of the pack. But yep, that's pretty much all I have to say about it. Thank you guys for watching, and I will
What up, friends? Bloom's here. So South Park just dropped a new episode and it's all about AI. Yeah, the boys discover a chatbot that will literally write their essays.
Excuse me, who the hell are you? Why are you pretending to be me? Wait a minute. You're not even real. You're an AI-generated imposter. But you look so real. This is getting real scary, guys. I mean, how do I know that I'm not AI too? And if we're both AI, does that mean... Alright, this part got copyrighted, so here's what it was. With a little love and some tenderness. We'll walk upon
Honey, I think we might need to check on
Yeah, I
him.
think I'm gonna give him a phone call. So the new episode of South Park just came out, and it was certainly something. It was all over the place. It really felt like there were like 8 different plot lines playing out simultaneously, which is kind of what I expected. As I mentioned previously, they've set up so many unfinished stories this season that they're definitely gonna need the last couple episodes to wrap them all up. But what really surprised me about this episode is that low-key, this might have been the best episode of the season for me. And when I say the season, I'm referring to season 27 and 28 because they're technically 2 different seasons, but it's really just one. Now, I don't think this was the most cohesive episode or even the funniest episode, and I do have my issues with it, but this episode's greatest strength was its lack of political commentary. Instead, this episode focused more on social commentary, targeting the malicious use of AI-generated videos, the ethics of the plagiaristic nature of generative AI, and they even found time to make fun of one of their favorite targets, the police. Now, of course, Trump and JD Vance still had their own side plot, but at this point, they're just characters in this narrative that they've been building for 7 episodes. And because of that, they can include them as characters in this plot without feeling like they need to comment on their real-life counterparts, which gave them the ability to do whatever they wanted with these characters, and I will be the first to tell you, they took full advantage of that. Now, obviously, they did still throw in a little bit of political commentary at the end, but despite that, this episode was incredibly refreshing. Obviously, I haven't hated the Trump stuff as much as a lot of people, but I can definitely admit that tuning in for every episode just to be reminded of the fact that the president recently signed the raise rent for single mothers bill has gotten pretty exhausting, and for the most part, they do a good job avoiding that in this episode. So let's go ahead and talk about it. The episode opens with Santa Claus pissing in Red's face. Yeah, they really come out swinging with this one. Also, I haven't seen anyone say this, but I think this might be like a subtle reference to Postal 2, because she's trying to get people to sign a petition and she gets pissed on. Could just be a coincidence, but I figured I'd mention that. It turns out it's actually just an AI video that Butters made with Sora 2. He made it to get revenge on Red for pretending to like him so that he'd buy her a Labubu back in episode 4 of the season. What's interesting is that they seem to have really leaned into the fact that Butters is kind of an incel nowadays, and I'm conflicted about that.
That bitch deserves it!
It started back in season 20 when his girlfriend broke up with him and he led an anti-woman movement. And I gotta be honest, I don't really enjoy the way his character has evolved. I do like the fact that Butters is a lot more willing to stand up for himself nowadays, but the incel angle just doesn't feel right for him. The whole reason Butters has always been so beloved by fans is that he's the only kid that still felt like a kid. He had a childlike innocence and naive positivity that all the other kids lost pretty quickly. Even when he was doing something morally questionable, like when he was pimping on the playground, it was always through the lens of a kid that didn't really know what he was doing. But nowadays he feels a lot more jaded. He curses all the time and he just feels more hateful, and that innocence seems to be slowly slipping away. I mean, realistically, it's kind of a natural progression for his character, but I really just miss the old Butters. It's especially weird because they haven't been super consistent about it either. Just a few episodes ago, he was back to his innocent self talking about how nice it is to have a lady friend. And don't get me wrong, he's definitely still entertaining and I like him in this episode. It's just hard for me to enjoy his character as much as I previously did. But anyways, PC Principal holds an assembly trying to get the students to be a little more patriotic, but his video is quickly replaced with a video of Butters having sex with Totoro. Turns out Red has been plotting and she decided to fight fire with fire. I do think it's pretty cool that they seem to be building Red's character a lot this season. I mean, she's been in the show since literally the first episode. She's always just been there, occasionally saying a few lines, but mostly being a background character. And I like the fact that they're willing to try to build up these old characters instead of just adding new ones, which is something they've been doing a lot more frequently. So Leanne goes to the police about the fact that Cartman was pretty much kidnapped by Peter Thiel, who only told her that they were going to DC. But she's interrupted when Detective Harris hears some much more important news.
There's a young boy there, sir. Appears he's been molested by Totoro. Holy shit!
He ends up questioning Butters at the school, but Butters refuses to talk because he knows that he's the one who started all of this. He's also shown another video of a student who seems to have fallen victim to Popeye the Sailor Man. He thinks all of this is somehow connected. Cartman's kidnapping, these children being abused, he just doesn't know how. He tries to question Kenny on what Popeye did to him, but he won't talk either. His interrogation is interrupted by some pissed off Studio Ghibli employees who have a serious problem with what Butters is doing.
This is a Shishu and the Shisto. Shishu and the Shisto.
Now, if you don't know, Totoro is a Studio Ghibli IP, and the reason they use Studio Ghibli here specifically is because for whatever reason, people love to use their art style when generating AI images. Pretty much every time you see one of those AI generated cartoon pictures, it's trying to emulate Studio Ghibli. They give out a cease and desist, but Detective Harris still has absolutely no clue what's going on.
All right. right, I can't understand a word anyone here is saying.
Meanwhile, Leanne watches obviously AI-generated videos where Cartman talks about how much fun he's having on his trip. Honestly, this was probably my favorite joke from the episode, with AI Cartman just spouting off his old catchphrases. I thought it was hilarious.
Just want to let everyone know I'm safe and sound. No, kitty, that's my pet pet. I love cheesy poops and respect my authority back.
So we find out that Peter Thiel is the one creating these AI videos to avoid suspicion, and Cartman isn't happy about it. Of course, he's not upset about the morality of using someone like this. He's just pissed he's not getting paid.
I haven't even talked about cheesy poops in like 5 years. If you want to use me, then you gotta pay a motherfucker.
So while all of that is going on, the president is busy menacingly staring down JD Vance, who is looking as adorable as ever. Now, I didn't actually mention it in my previous video, but last episode, Trump found out that JD Vance was plotting behind his back to get rid of Satan's baby. Trump is pretty upset that JD tried to deceive him, despite the fact that he also wants to get rid of the baby. But JD makes sure to reassure him that they have the same end goal, and he explains to him that he has someone that can help take care of all of this. We then cut to both of them chilling in a hot tub, where JD explains to him that he cares about him more than anyone else.
Nobody feels for you the way that I do. Nobody both.
This scene immediately reminded me of the season 3 episode, appropriately titled Two Guys Naked in a Hot Tub, where Gerald and Randy share an intimate moment in the hot tub. We then get a scene where Droopy the dog craps into Kyle's mouth, which of course is another AI video created by the girls. And Kyle was the one initially warning Butters not to create the AI videos, but now that he's being targeted by them, he immediately hops on the bandwagon. The detectives are still trying to put the pieces together in this grand conspiracy of cartoon characters assaulting children, and I love their little red thread board with all of the cartoon characters and their connections. Now, I've seen a lot of people talk about the cartoon characters they pick for this, because in reality the choices don't really make much sense. Like, what kid nowadays would be making AI videos of Betty Boop, Pink Panther, or Yogi Bear? But this didn't really bother me, because Matt and Trey have always loved these old school cartoons and reference them all the time. Plus, I think they know that if they just used memes that kids actually like, the vast majority of their audience would be incredibly confused. Like, imagine if Butters assaulted Tung Sahur and Kyle got crapped on by John Pork. It would be borderline incomprehensible to anyone over the age of 16. But since none of the kids are willing to talk, the cops decide that they need to go undercover to gain their trust. Now, the cops in this episode are pretty hilarious. I love the fact that they just can't comprehend the idea that these videos might be fake, and instead choose to believe that these kids are actually getting assaulted by fictional characters. It felt especially real, since it seems like anyone over the age of 40 has absolutely zero ability to tell when a video is AI. Like, literally the day after this episode came out, one of my coworkers showed me a TikTok of this lion putting its cub into a safari truck to protect it from hyenas, and I spent the next 15 minutes trying to explain to him that this is AI and how to recognize these videos. And of course, anyone that has parents that use Facebook know exactly what that's like. I just find it fascinating how growing up on the internet, I built this inherent distrust of anything that seems unrealistic, and despite how good these AI videos are getting, it's still pretty easy to recognize them for me. But for the older folks who haven't watched the evolution of this stuff, they just blindly believe whatever's put in front of them without even questioning it, even when it's things that they know are impossible. They just cannot comprehend the idea that someone could be trying to deceive them, and honestly, it's kind of sad. And I think the cops in this episode are the perfect way to make fun of these people, having them believe that literal fictional characters are part of a child abuse ring simply because these videos are too real to question. It being the police specifically also made a lot of sense to me, because South Park has a very long history of using them as a representation of incompetence for obvious reasons. So meanwhile, back at the White House, JD Vance gives Peter Thiel a call and lets him know that Trump is officially in on their plan. He told him everything and he's fully supportive of it. We then get a scene of Trump and JD in bed, and things escalate very quickly. I wish I could show this scene because it is so funny, but it's pretty graphic, so you'll have to go watch it yourself. But this scene kind of represents what I was saying earlier when I said that the Trump and JD plot is so absurd that it actually works much better than when they're trying to do political commentary. Like, making Trump and JD Vance have a graphic, steamy movie sex scene is way funnier than anything they could say about these two politically. It reminds me a lot of the first episode of the season, where Trump was just this silly caricature with a tiny penis. It's intentionally juvenile and ridiculous, and that's what made it funny in the first place. And I think they kind of lost sight of that over the course of this season. I think a huge part of the reason people loved that episode so much was because they weren't trying to make any overt statements about his politics like everyone else who tries to make fun of Trump. Instead, they were just clowning on him because of how ridiculous he is. And in my opinion, that's really the only effective way to make fun of Trump, because everything else about him is so ridiculous that it's beyond parody. This scene also immediately gave me Team America Jericho World Police vibes, which, if you don't know, was a movie Matt and Trey made with puppets back in 2004. They have a sex scene in that movie that is incredibly graphic and over the top to the point where it's comedic, especially since it's done by 2 puppets, and it definitely felt like Matt and Trey channeled that energy for this one. Especially since this scene was also performed by 2 puppets, am I right? Okay. We then cut back to Detective Harris and Mitch, who are undercover as Rocky and Bullwinkle, and they chat about how much things have been changing. They lament about what their job used to be like and how strange everything is now, with criminals whose appearances can just change at will and how tough it's making their job.
Maybe the job doesn't need you anymore.
They end up trying to pick up Red to get her to talk, and then we cut to Kyle, Butters, and Kenny defending themselves in a courtroom due to their AI creation. The person pressing the charges isn't Red, though. It's someone whose likeness was used without their permission.
That's right. They made me do things I would normally never do.
Now, what's weird about this scene in particular is that it seems to be real. And what I mean by that is that the episode has had several scenes where you don't realize it's a Sora 2 video until it cuts to the boys reacting to the video, but this scene never does that. So it seems like the implication is that Bluey is really testifying against them in court. And that alone opens up a whole bunch of questions about the rest of the episode, like why is she real? Are the other fictional characters they used also real? And if that's the case, then maybe the police weren't as incompetent as we thought. I mean, if they're real, then it makes way more sense that the cops thought they might actually be responsible for these crimes. The whole thing doesn't really make any sense, but if there's one thing we know about Matt and Trey, it's that they're willing to add some plot holes for the sake of comedy.
I didn't make 1 cent.
Now, one thing I haven't really seen anyone point out about this episode is that it's pretty meta. One of the main things they're commenting on is how AI just lets you use anyone's likeness or IP without consent or compensation for the owner. And the reason that's meta is because that's exactly what the show is doing in this episode and what they've done for almost 30 years. I mean, not only did they animate all of the Sora 2 videos that the boys made with these characters, they also just made Donald Trump and JD Vance have graphic sex. So to me, this whole thing kind of feels like them poking fun at themselves, pointing out the irony that them of all people are making this statement, but I also don't think that they're equating what they do with what people are doing with AI. South Park can do what they do because it's parody. They're imitating things and exaggerating them for comedic effect. But these generative AI tools are trained on the actual copyrighted material. Sora 2 has seen every episode of South Park. So when you ask Sora 2 to make a South Park character, it's just using that copyrighted material to recreate the character. It's not imitating, it's just taking. And that's of course besides the fact that all of the copyrighted material these AIs were trained on were used without consent from the copyright holders. So yeah, I just figured I'd mention that because I haven't seen anyone else say it, but I do think that that was an intentional like meta commentary they were making. So Butters finally admits to using Sora 2 for the videos after seeing Cartman's videos, and upon hearing this, the police realize what exactly this means.
You're saying that the Eric Cartman videos are all being created by someone to distort the truth? That's gotta be Totoro! Trace the IP address and let's get the son of a bitch!
So they raid Peter Thiel's hotel room, still fully expecting to find Totoro there, and despite the fact that he is clearly not Totoro, they still don't really understand.
But no magical cat bus is gonna whisk you away from justice this time!
Cartman is finally reunited with his mother, where he's not too happy about the fact that she couldn't tell that those videos were fake.
When is the last time I even ate a pot pie, you dumb bitch?
But as the police sweep the hotel room, they end up finding security footage from all of Peter Thiel's surveillance cameras, and as it turns out, he has more than a few in the White House, including in the Lincoln bedroom. So that's when we get a Fox News special alert, and I haven't mentioned it in any of my other videos, but it's been a running gag this whole season that every time there's one of these, the way Trey says Fox News special alert has gotten more and more like ridiculous every time, but this time he's just really depressed when he said it, and I thought it was really funny.
This is a Fox News special alert.
But everyone at Fox is incredibly upset about this leaked footage of Trump and Vance. Trump ends up calling into the show to defend himself, and his defense is exactly what I think all of us expected. Of course, Fox News immediately takes his word, and their spirits are completely restored. What's funny is that this bit actually became more relevant immediately after this episode was aired, considering the recently released Epstein emails that would implicate Trump as knowing about the things Epstein was doing, and Trump immediately calling them a Democrat hoax. This, of course, comes after he campaigned on releasing the files, then said he wasn't in the files, then said there are no files, then got mad everyone was still asking about the files, then said there are files but they're a Democrat hoax, then said these emails are a Democrat Democrat hoax, then said actually the files are real and they're full of Democrats, but my name being in there is a hoax. And now he's promising to investigate the files to get the Democrats in them, the files which both do not exist and are a Democrat hoax, which coincidentally would mean that these files can't be released since they're part of an active investigation. And then he even went as far as to turn his back on his day ones by declaring the fact that he doesn't support Marjorie Taylor Greene anymore because she's wacky and all she does is complain. The complaining in question, of course, is her continued pushing for the release of the Epstein files. These are totally normal behaviors for someone who is completely innocent. But anyways, the episode ends with Trump and Vance discussing how everything is in place to begin their plan, and they share a passionate kiss as the credits roll. So that was the episode, and like I said, this might be my favorite of the season. It's still hard to beat the first episode because of how insane it is with the context of everything going on at Paramount and all that, but in terms of entertainment directly from the episode, this has probably been my favorite. I love their willingness to get really wacky with this one, and the fact that they could do the Trump and JD parodies without feeling the need to do political commentary specifically. I mean, really the only political commentary in the whole episode was the bit at the end with Fox just accepting Trump's word of the videos being a hoax. But this episode has me fully bought in on the Trump and JD plot now. Assuming they continue in this manner, I'm really excited to see where they go with it. And of course, I enjoyed the AI stuff as well. Detective Harris is one of my favorite recurring characters in the show, and whenever they make fun of cops, they tend to do a pretty good job. But the episode definitely did have some issues. There are some weird plot holes, and the story was a little bit disjointed, especially with the courthouse scene, which kind of came out of nowhere, and Butters, who essentially has a I learned something today moment at the end, felt out of place. Like, they never really showed any reason for Butters to have this sudden change of heart. And I don't really like how they wrapped up the Peter Thiel plot either. It seems like they wrote themselves into an awkward spot with that plot and didn't really know what to do with it, so they just decided to chalk it up altogether, and it was a very unsatisfying way to end it. But apparently the police still have Peter Thiel, so who knows what they plan on doing with him in the next 2 episodes. And speaking of the next 2 episodes, it's almost certainly going to be a 2-parter to wrap up the season. At this point, I have no clue where this story is going to go, but I am excited to see it. Pretty much the only theory I have has to do with the fact that the Antichrist is supposedly coming, the only way to stop it is an abortion, and we are nearing Christmas. And upon hearing that, I imagine some of you may be realizing what I'm getting at. The fact that this is the exact same setup as one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, Woodland Critter Christmas. It's all been lining up just a little too perfectly, and it would be awesome if they brought back the Woodland Critters. But yeah, that's pretty much it. I'm excited to see where we go from here, and I will talk to you guys again soon. So the second to last episode of the South Park season came out about a week and a half ago now, and considering how consistently I've been uploading, it was inevitable that I would be incredibly late at some point, so here we are. But shockingly, this time I actually do have a good excuse, because I got married. That's right, I'm a married man. Sorry ladies, I know you've all been hoping you'd have your chance at the guy who summarizes South Park episodes on the internet, but I'm officially off limits. But that's enough of all this getting married crap. Let's talk about something that actually matters. Like South Park. This was a Thanksgiving themed episode, and what was interesting about this one is that it felt like they reeled it back into a more classic South Park story. This surprised me because the whole season has been building up to the Trump and Satan plotline, with Trump being heavily featured in every episode so far, but this episode had barely any Trump at all. In fact, he only appears in one single scene throughout the entire episode. Instead, the episode focuses mostly on the town, as the annual turkey trot race has a grand prize of $5,000 for the winner, and everyone starts to plan how they're gonna win. They also comment on Saudi Arabia, specifically the comedians who decided to attend the Riyadh Comedy Festival paid for by the Saudi royal family. And of course, it wouldn't be a new episode without going after someone in the current administration, and this time they really tear into Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War. So enough of the intro, let's just get into it. The episode opens with a city council meeting discussing the plan for the annual turkey trot. They're trying to find a sponsor, but with the economy in its current state, they're having a lot of trouble. We also get to see Mr. Mackey in his new job as a custodian, which was a funny way to show what he's been up to since quitting from his position at ICE earlier in the season. The group does end up coming up with a sponsor who might be willing to help, and we find out who exactly that is in a commercial.
South Park Turkey Trot, sponsored by Saudi Arabia.
This was definitely one of my favorite parts of the episode. One of my favorite things they used to do in old South Park is when they would make fake commercials for stuff. It's something they don't really do that often anymore, and the fact that they did it in this case was perfect. It really reminded me of old school South Park a lot, especially with the song in the background playing Arabic gibberish the whole time. It really took me back to the golden age.
Disparaging remarks towards the Saudi royal family are strictly prohibited.
And of course, the irony of an event centered around Thanksgiving, a strictly American holiday, being sponsored by Saudi Arabia was just the cherry on top. Now, if you somehow don't know, as I mentioned, this is in reference to the fact that Saudi Arabia has really been pushing to expand their entertainment industry, investing heavily into everything from the UFC to golf to Formula 1, esports, theme parks, pretty much any aspect of entertainment you can imagine. One of their most recent endeavors was into the comedy scene, hosting the Riyadh Comedy Festival with some of the biggest names in the industry attending. It eventually came out that the comedians had a very strict list of topics that they had to agree not to mention in their sets, including the country itself, its legal system, and anything about the Saudi royal family or their religion. Now, if you know anything about Matt and Trey, you know how they feel about censorship, so it's not really surprising that they decided to fire some shots at the comedians willing to take this deal. Not to mention Saudi Arabia's history of maybe some not so ethical practices, like murdering journalists who are critical of the government and their use of slave labor, but they do have an infinite amount of money to do whatever they want, so of course when these comedians saw the numbers, most of them were more than happy to overlook all that stuff. The irony, of course, being that a lot of these comedians claim to stand against much of what they were directly supporting by signing these contracts. Dave Chappelle was one of my favorite comedians for a long time, and in recent years he's complained a lot about how you can't do comedy anymore because everything is woke and you might get canceled for it. So for him to sign a deal where they are literally telling him he can't say certain things and then go on stage and complain about free speech in America, some might say that's a tad hypocritical. And don't get me started on Bill Burr, who I've also been a big fan of for a long time. For the past few years, he's been talking non-stop about billionaires and preaching against the 1%, even tearing into celebrities who have taken blood money because they're greedy.
Beyonce and Mariah Carey actually did private New Year's gigs for $1 million. Did New Year's gigs for Gaddafi's kids. How much fucking money do you need to make? You know, you're gonna go dance like a goddamn fucking clown for a mass murderer's kids, and then you take that fucking blood money.
But of course, when the price was right, he was more than willing to take the blood money for the exact reasons he's been preaching against nonstop. And then there's Pete Davidson, whose dad died in 9/11. And I'm not going to explain that one because it's a bit controversial, but you can do your own research into it. Now, if these comedians just came out and were honest about it, saying, listen, the money was just too good, I'm willing to look past all of that because they're paying me millions of dollars, that would be far more respectable than anything they're doing now. Like Bill Burr trying to defend it, saying he's actually just trying to help them progress and that maybe one day they will actually allow free speech. No, dude, they offered you more money than you've ever been offered for a single show and you took the money. Just admit that. That's why Tim Dillon's response was my favorite, because he was 100% honest, and that's so much more respectable.
They're paying me enough money to look the other way. Do you understand?
No, of course I am. Everyone should be doing it. Everyone should be getting every dollar they can. This has been my consistent position for my entire life. I don't care if they execute half the comics in front of me.
Now, maybe he should have waited till after the check cleared to share his honesty, considering it got him fired from the show, and ironically, his firing just proved how strict they actually are about their censorship. But regardless, he's just saying what all of these comedians are actually thinking. Anyways, this was a video about South Park at some point, so let's get back to that. When the boys hear about the grand prize, they are more than willing to take the money.
If anybody's gonna get money from Saudi Arabia, it should be us.
Cartman proves to be the mastermind behind their team, as he claims to know exactly what they need to do to win.
I know a way to give our team an optimal winning advantage. Token. Hey, man.
That's another thing I really liked about this episode. This is just classic Cartman being Cartman, and it works super well. Cartman continuously guilt trips Token until eventually he agrees to join the team. Meanwhile, the cops keep getting calls from the president demanding that they release Peter Thiel, who they still have in custody, but when they refuse, the president sends in Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of War.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Pete Hegseth, the Department of War. We're here to infiltrate this police station and extract the POI.
Now, I'm gonna be honest, I don't know a lot about this dude or what this is specifically referencing. I know he was the one in charge of striking those Venezuelan boats that supposedly had drug smugglers on them, and I think we're like going to war with Venezuela now or something. I don't know, dude. I've been trying to like actually go outside a bit more often nowadays, so haven't been keeping up. But looking through his Twitter pages, I did understand why they portrayed him like this. I mean, this dude makes a lot of videos for social media talking about what the Department of War is doing. In the episode, he's shown to be this pretty pathetic dude just role-playing as some kind of war general, and like I said, I don't know that much about him, but he was a funny character regardless. So everyone in town goes about registering for the turkey trot, and Cartman is pretty confident in their team with Token on their side until he sees the girls' team.
Hey guys, what's up?
We then get a look at some of the content from Pete Hegseth, where he talks about how badass they are and how they're going to do what needs to be done. However, his content is interrupted when the president calls him to remind him of what he actually needs to do.
Don't just make a bunch of content. Like, actually go and do something.
Be sure to like and subscribe, guys. Yes, sir, Mr. President, I will make this town pay!
The morning of the race, Cartman finds out that Token bailed on the team because it's sponsored by Saudi Arabia and he just can't support them politically. He tries to convince Token to race through his classic Cartman manipulation tactics, and he had some pretty funny lines that felt a lot like they were making fun of the excuses that some of those comedians tried to give.
They're trying to be progressive, okay? If Saudi Arabia is out paying for sporting events, they're not out hacking up reporters and inviting Pete Davidson to come do comedy.
Token is busy playing Arc Raiders, so he just completely ignores Cartman. So Cartman goes for the last resort and decides to steal his Xbox 360. I'm sorry, but how is Token playing Arc Raiders on an Xbox 360? I'm pretty sure that game isn't even on last-gen consoles, let alone 2 generations ago. Trey Parker is a pretty avid gamer too. There's no way he doesn't realize that the 360 hasn't been supported in years. I don't know how this made it through. So anyways, the turkey trot starts, and Pete Hegseth watches on in horror, believing that they're being fired upon, and of course, not actually doing anything besides making content.
There's an uprising here, some kind of insurrection. Be sure to like and subscribe.
This bit reminded me a lot of Randy back in season 12 in Pandemic 1 and 2, when he's doing the Cloverfield parody and over-dramatizing everything. Just figured I'd mention that. But he shares his plan of action with his troops, which once again doesn't involve actually doing much of anything.
3rd Battalion, you'll be posting up here. I want you posting on Instagram and Twitter.
However, he is interrupted when Christy Gnome and Ice show up, hearing that there's a civilian uprising, and they're not going to miss their chance for content. Christy decides to take the civilian uprising head on, making sure to take out the most dangerous ones first, just doing what she does best. Meanwhile, Pete just ends up firing a bunch of tear gas into the crowd, which causes the race to get all broken up, but the people are desperate to get that prize money, and the only thing that matters to them is whether Saudi Arabia will be okay with their new route. Pete ends up getting his own montage, creating content and attacking civilians set to a parody of Danger Zone that's not exactly subtle. And while all of this is going on, Cartman ends up leading Token directly into the turkey trot as he tries to get his Xbox back. When Token eventually catches up to him, he takes his Xbox and leaves, accidentally walking directly over the finish line and winning the race.
Yes! Race science! Race science!
The episode ends with the cops tossing Pete Hegseth into a cell alongside Peter Thiel, who reminds us that this isn't over yet.
South Park's gonna pay for this. They're all gonna pay.
And that is where the episode ends. So now let's get into my thoughts on it as a whole. You know, when I first watched this episode, I thought it was just okay, nothing really special, but rewatching it while making this, I gotta say, this episode actually grew on me a lot. The fact that there was essentially no Trump in this episode was a huge refresher. It really just felt like a breath of fresh air overall. As I've said many times at this point, I don't outright hate the Trump stuff. I just think they leaned way too heavily into it early on in the season and got caught in the trap of, let's just talk about whatever Trump did this week. Now, of course, that didn't stop them from making fun of the administration, as they really clowned on Pete Hegseth here. And like I said, I don't want to speak to the accuracy of the parody or anything because I really don't know much about the guy, but I will say that I really enjoyed his character in the episode. That archetype of guy who thinks he's a badass but is really just kind of pathetic and doesn't do anything is actually one that South Park has done several times in the past, and I think it worked really well here. I really liked how no matter what was happening, he had to make sure he was making content out of it in some way, and the fact that they brought Christy Gnome and Ice back to get content as well was a pretty funny way to show how this seems to be a common theme through all the branches of this administration. For whatever reason, our government has been obsessed with creating social media content. You can say that they're just trying to be transparent or they're creating propaganda or whatever you believe, but one thing is for sure, they want everything to be a spectacle, and whatever the reason for it is, I think this episode did a great job in parodying this content-first model they're sticking to. And of course, by now, you know how I feel about the Saudi Arabia thing. I thought it was the highlight of the episode, and when it comes to this season, any social commentary that's not just about the current politics is a refresher. And this one really felt like it was perfectly designed for South Park to make fun of. Censorship, hypocrisy, money over morals, these are like the 3 big things that South Park satirizes more than anything else. Like, if this was mainstream news 20 years ago, they would have 100% made an episode about it without question. And while the execution maybe left a little bit to be desired in terms of what they actually had to say about it, I still thought it was one of the best plot lines of the season. Another thing I really liked about this episode is that it seems like there was an active attempt to make it more focused on the boys. Granted, Granted, it ends up focusing a lot more on Cartman and Token than the whole group, but to me, it feels like a step in the right direction. As I said, we got a pretty vintage Cartman here. He played his role perfectly, and his racism and manipulation was just classic Cartman being Cartman. Not to mention the fact that Cartman and Token is actually a very underrated duo. Cartman antagonizing Token has given us some pretty hilarious moments throughout the show, and it was executed super well here. Now, my only criticism of this episode is that, once again, it didn't really move the underlying plot forward at all, and normally I would never complain about that, but for this season in particular, with such a serialized plotline, it makes me wonder where they're going with this. Like, the story really hasn't moved forward at all in a few episodes now. Did they realize that the story was not nearly as complex as they thought it would be and have just been giving us filler episodes until the grand finale? Or is all of this somehow still setting up for the finale? We'll find out soon enough, since it's supposed to air next Wednesday. And let me just say, I'm pretty glad we're coming to the end of the season. And not because I don't want more South Park, but the prospect of moving past this Trump plot is what I'm most looking forward to. And if I'm being honest, to be a little bit vulnerable with you guys, I really don't think I'm good at making these episode reviews. I try to make them more entertaining by attempting to do bits or add my own humor, but to me, it always feels like I'm just summarizing the episode and saying, "Huh, I thought that was funny," and that's it. I really can't help but feel like I'm just pushing out a bunch of slop that I'm not super passionate about, and I kinda hate that. In my personal opinion, my videos have always been at their best when I have an idea for a video, a thesis that I can build off of. My whole passion, the reason I started YouTube in the first place, is because I love explaining to people why the things that I find cool or interesting are cool or interesting. I'm not a reviewer. I'm not good at being analytical. I don't know much about the art of storytelling, and I don't really know how to critique it either. Other channels like Johnny Two Cellos or Slush are way better than me when it comes to that kind of stuff. And with episode reviews, especially for this season, I've always felt like I'm trying to come up with something to say. I just don't really enjoy it, and I feel like the video quality suffers because of that. And with that being said, I will still make a review of the finale, but I can't promise anything about the future episodes of the show. What I mean by that is making individual videos for each episode. Obviously, I'll still talk about the episodes. It'll probably just be in a different format, like one big video at the end of the season or something like that. Now, that doesn't mean I'm sick of South Park in any way. I actually have several ideas for South Park videos in the works. I'm just sick of making these type of South Park videos, these reviews where I feel like I have nothing to say. I don't know. I just wanted to rant a little bit. Sorry if you don't care, just figured the best thing is to be honest with you guys about how I'm feeling. So that's it for this video. I will see you guys for the grand finale next week. I'll tell you what, we could have had a real good season this year. A real good season. But you didn't want it, South Park. So what we got now is Donald Trump. Everything's built on him. He's all we got. Fucking all, boy. So I hope you know that if you don't ever plan to do anything else. You have no idea how hard it gets. And I'm not you. I can't handle my comedy being taken over by that man over and over. It is just too much for me, man. I can't handle it. I wish I knew how to quit you. It's over. We're done, okay? It's because of you people I'm like this. We never wanted all this, but how could we not? Come here. Thank you. It's okay. It's okay. It's over. Well, here we are. The season finale of South Park just came out, and it was maybe the most meta episode of the season so far. With all of the different plot points introduced throughout the season, it really made me wonder what the plan for this episode was. How are they going to possibly tie up all these different loose ends without it feeling like a contrived Deus Ex Machina? Well, they gave us our answer, and it was a simple one. They weren't. Matt and Trey basically said, fuck it, everyone's hating on this Trump stuff anyways, let's just do whatever we want for this episode while the characters talk about how none of this makes sense. This included bringing back some fan favorite characters, a few original Christmas songs, and an intentionally anticlimactic ending that caught me so off guard that I couldn't help but appreciate how dumb it was. It really felt like they were totally over trying to make this plot coherent at all and decided to just give us some fan service and jokes with almost no political or social commentary. And in the end, this finale was everything I hoped for, seemingly just giving us a hard reset set for the show, rewinding back to simpler times before Trump Integrity Farms. It gave me some hope that maybe they really are going to dial it back moving forward. That would really be a Christmas miracle. So let's talk about this season finale and all of the chaos that came with it. The episode opens with Stan venting about how awful these last few months have been, referencing plots of earlier episodes like the ice raids and his family moving out of Integrity Farms. Everything has just been changing so much and he doesn't know how to handle it. He's telling this to the school counselor, Jesus, who sits there strumming an electric guitar. If you'll remember a few episodes ago, Jesus shifted into a MAGA Christian persona, and I was wondering when that would come back into play. Stan discusses how everyone needs a Christmas miracle. He's even thinking of giving away some of the money he won from Saudi Arabia, but Jesus tells him that there will be no miracles this year. Meanwhile, at the White House, Satan is busy decorating the nursery as he happily sings an original Christmas song. This is pretty fitting for his character since we know that, ironically, he's a big fan of Christmas, and this song reminded me a lot of Christmas Time in Hell from Season 3.
Here's a rack to hang the stockings on. We still have to shop for Genghis Khan. Michael Landon's hair looks swell. It's Christmas time in hell.
But his song is cut short when he finds out that Trump went with Vance to Colorado on classified business. They're in disguise in South Park, camping outside of the police station, planning how they're gonna bust out Peter Thiel, who is the only one who knows how to take down the Antichrist.
Okay, let's synchronize our watches. It's time to complete Operation Kill My Own Baby.
Meanwhile, at the old folks' home, Stan is watching Jesus' girlfriend do her carols for all the old people, and she has her own original Christmas carol that's a little bit on the nose.
A Christian woman knows her place, so go ahead and punch me in the face, 'cause I deserve it, I was wrong.
Honestly, this character is just so insufferable, which I get is kind of the whole point, but I genuinely can't stand her, and Stan clearly feels the same way as he angrily walks out of there. He decides to stop by the bathroom on the way out, and hoping for a Christmas miracle, decides to talk to the toilet.
I don't know if you can hear me, but I've been kind of wishing for a Christmas miracle.
Now this is referencing Mr. Hanky the Christmas Poo, who was a recurring character in the early seasons going all the way back to season 1. He always knew how to spread Christmas cheer, and Stan is desperate to get some of that back. And Stan does get a Christmas miracle, just not exactly the one he was hoping for.
Yay! Oh no! Did you miss us, Stan? Oh no!
Oh, hell yes. So they decide to bring back the woodland critters, the satanic forest critters who tried to bring about the coming of the Antichrist back in season 8. And when I saw this, I was insanely hyped up. Woodland Critter Christmas is in my top 3 episodes of the entire show, and I actually predicted this correctly a couple of videos ago. The Antichrist is supposedly coming, the only way to stop it is an abortion, and we are nearing Christmas. This is the exact same setup as one of my favorite episodes of the entire show, Woodland Critter Christmas. The critters are excited about the birth of the Antichrist, which they refer to as a crap out because, you know, it's a butt baby and that's how it would work, I guess. Stan is just confused because the woodland critters originally turned out to be characters in Cartman's Christmas story he wrote for schools, so they're not even real. The only other time we saw them was in Imagination Land, where imaginary characters live, so this doesn't really make any sense. Although I will say that technically the critters did appear in the real world in the Fractured But Whole video game. They were actually one of the main boss fights after Cartman creates a society where it's just Christmas all the time, although technically I think that was like an alternate reality or something. I don't really remember, so it's kind of confusing, but the critters end up responding to Stan with some foreshadowing about how this episode is gonna play out.
Oh, are you really gonna overanalyze a crap out? No way, crap outs have no rules!
Again, this is basically Matt and Trey just saying, who cares about trying to make sense of all this? Let's just have some fun with it. Now, the critters really don't do anything in this episode. They kind of just follow Stan around as he tries to figure out what to do. It definitely feels like they were only put into the story for fan service and nostalgia baiting purposes, but considering I'm the target audience for that kind of stuff, I really don't care at all, and I love the fact that they were included. This was honestly my Christmas miracle, and I couldn't be happier about it. Back at the White House, Satan is doing the laundry when he finds a jockstrap with the letters JV embroidered onto them. He's confused by this until it's all explained to him by another piece of laundry. You may remember back in episode 3 of this season, Towley was given as a gift to the president by Randy to try to get into his good graces for his AI weed company, and Towley immediately became their cum rag, which means he's seen everything that's been going on between the two. He says he'll tell Satan everything he knows, as long as he can do just one thing for him.
I need to get just a little high.
After he lights up, Towley is feeling much better and explains to Satan everything that's been going on. Vance's plan to get rid of the baby, Peter Thiel getting involved, Pam Bondi finding out about the plan, Trump cheating with Vance, he pretty much tackles everything, and Satan vows to get his revenge on Trump. Meanwhile, the critters tell Stan about how nothing is going to get in the way of this crap out since there's only one person that could put a stop to it.
Nothing can stop the Antichrist from coming.
Except, of course, for Peter Thiel. Peter Thiel? Wait, you mean the 6'7" guy?
Now at this point, Stan is not fully bought into the crap out, but the critters reassure him.
If I'm gonna get on board with something, I need it to make at least a little bit of sense. Well, okay, Susan Sontag, we'll make sure it all lines up perfectly for you.
Satan and Towley arrive in South Park and confront Trump and Vance, and Satan is super pissed off. But just then, Stan and the Woodland Critters show up as well, and Stan asks Towley what is even going on. Towley's response is honestly one of my favorite lines from the episode.
What's going on is the most exquisitely woven tapestry of ideas that you've ever seen, man.
Again, I love how Matt and Trey just fully leaned into this, making absolutely no sense, and having Towley sarcastically act like this was some kind of genius level writing from them was pretty hilarious. Satan tells Trump that it's over and he will finally be held accountable for his actions. But just then, Jesus literally falls from the sky and joins up with Trump and Vance.
Keep your hands off my president, bro.
What the hell happened to Jesus?
He's all Christian now.
He's not going to let anything happen to his president, so he pulls out his guitar and teleports them away. He then uses these new superpowers to bust into the police station and break out Peter Thiel and Pete Hegseth. I mentioned at the beginning of this video the idea of Deus Ex Machina, which, if you don't know, is a plot device where something just comes out of nowhere to save the day in a story. It literally translates as God from the machine, and it comes from ancient Greek theater, where a lot of the time the characters were saved in the end by God himself descending from heaven and just being like, I'm here to save you guys, and now everything is back to normal. It's kind of looked at as a major sin in writing since it's a lazy way to get out of an unwinnable situation. And I mention all of this to say that the fact that they used a literal Deus Ex Machina by having Jesus come in and free everyone was a pretty funny way to really emphasize just how much they leaned into this crap out. So Satan goes into labor and Stan takes him to the hospital, where Satan complains about how he always falls for the worst guys. So Trump, Thiel, Hegseth, and Jesus all show up to the hospital ready to take out this baby once and for all, with Jesus playing a pretty epic riff as they approach.
Let's do this!
Where is room 6-7? Thank you.
They're met by Stan, Towley, and the Woodland Critters, where they face off for the epic final showdown. Stan questions Jesus on what's happened to him, how did he get to this point, and Jesus immediately decides that Stan is right and switches sides. Now, normally I would criticize this for being way too quick of a switch up. Like, he literally went from being fully bought in to admitting that he was wrong after Stan literally just said one line. But again, in this case, it actually makes sense because the whole point is that the resolution to all of these plot lines is so contrived and nonsensical. But just as the battle is about to begin, the Doctor comes out with some bad news, giving us quite possibly the most contrived way to resolve the most important plot line in all of this.
It appears that at some point when nobody was watching, the baby hung itself and took its own life.
What?
I'm afraid you can see it all in the video. The baby got a hold of some bed sheets. There's a couple minutes missing from the ultrasound, but it's definitely a suicide.
How convenient. The Antichrist hung itself, and now the president gets away scot-free. I mean, talk about unrealistic. In all seriousness, this was probably the funniest way they could have ended this plotline. Having all this build up for an entire season, everyone questioning who the Antichrist was going to be and what they were going to do with it, having this entire finale wrapping up plotlines in the most manufactured, unnatural ways, just for the most contrived, anticlimactic ending of them all to be the one that actually happened in real life. Watching this for the first time, I could not believe that that's what they went with to resolve this plot. Like, obviously I know South Park well enough to know that it would probably be pretty anticlimactic because that's just Matt and Trey's humor, but all of this build-up just for an Epstein parallel had me straight up gobsmacked. We then get a Fox News special alert where they give their own analysis into the situation.
Just what babies do sometimes.
And meanwhile, Trump is holding a funeral for the baby at the White House, which is a bit unorthodox, and of course Pam Bondi gives her own take on the situation.
You're so strong, Mr. President, and you're taking it really well.
And while all of that is going on, Satan is busy dejectedly packing up his stuff and leaving the White House, watching as the president celebrates getting away with everything. Honestly, this was surprisingly depressing. You really can't help but feel bad for Satan, as not only did he lose his baby, but also put up with the president's antics for months just for him to never face any consequences. It was genuinely sad, but at the same time relieving to see that at the very least, the Trump and Satan plotline is done for good. The episode ends with Stan getting a letter from Jesus, apologizing and giving him his Christmas miracle. He is given the key to his old house, where he sees it decked out in Christmas decorations. And I'm not gonna lie, I started to feel a bit emotional watching this part. I know it's stupid, but it's been 7 years since Randy moved the family out to Tegrity Farms in season 22, and that time period of South Park was when everything in the show really started to change. Seasons 20 through 22 were definitely the dark ages of the show in my opinion, and it started to feel less and less like South Park. Ever since then, the show has really struggled to return to normalcy because they were so committed to all of these plot lines they had laid out. And Stan returning to his house, along with this episode as a whole, really just felt like they're done with all of that. They just want to hard reset and give us the South Park we've been missing for years at this point. They're giving us what we've been asking for so long, no matter how contrived it is. And Stan getting his house back really just feels like that final symbol of a return to normalcy. He thanks Jesus for the Christmas miracle, and Jesus gives him some reassuring words before the credits roll.
And remember, never give up on the things that you commit to.
He's so great, isn't he? Merry Christmas, everyone!
And that is how the episode ends. So now, for the final time this year, let's talk about it. So the first thing I want to talk about is this ending. I haven't seen anyone point this out yet, but this ending really felt like Matt and Trey talking directly to the fans. Specifically his last line saying, "Never give up on the things you commit to." It's like we, the fans, are Stan, and Matt and Trey are telling us, thank you for sticking through this with us. We know a lot of you hated it, but we were committed to this, and to show our appreciation, here's a little Christmas miracle for you. We told you things would go back to normal, so we're giving you exactly that.
Things will get back, Stan. I know it's hard to see right now, but things will go back to normal. And in the meantime, we just have to make the most of where we are.
But also, let's not forget that this episode ended with Trump still very present. They didn't outright shut the door on Trump making more appearances, which is slightly worrying, but I have faith that Matt and Trey are gonna give us what we want. And speaking of Trump, let's talk about his ending in particular. A big theme of this episode was Trump facing the consequences of his actions, a retribution, so to speak. But in the end, he gets off scot-free. And this is really the only commentary they make in the episode. That, of course, being that in the real world, Trump will never face any consequences. Whether it's the blatant corruption that we've seen through the entire government, especially even more recently with the sale of Warner Brothers turning into a battle to see which company can bounce on Trump's dick harder, or the Epstein files, which are supposed to be released soon and which will almost certainly come out looking like a barcode, all of that stuff. Trump will never face any consequences because he's the president and he's willing to do whatever he needs to do what he wants. Weirdly enough, this reminded me a lot of the P. Diddy documentary that just came out because it has a lot of similar themes of the harsh reality that if you have enough power, you can get away with anything. But yeah, that was really the only political commentary they made in the episode, and honestly, it kind of fits with their attitude of this episode. It's almost like an acceptance of the way things are now. Essentially that, yeah, Trump is here and he's doing crazy shit all the time, but he's always gonna win in the end and we have nothing left to say about it, so let's move on already. But that's it. That's the end of the season, and my God, is that a relief. That's kind of how I felt about this episode as a whole, honestly. It was just relieving. I didn't hate this season. I still thought it was better than seasons 20 and 21 at least, but their insistence on following through with this Trump plot, combined with the fact that the season was stretched out over 5 months because of the weird schedule, this season has been really draining. And for me personally, it's been coupled with probably the most stressful half a year of my entire life, with family emergencies earlier in the year, planning a wedding in a much shorter amount of time than previously thought, working part-time as a psych nurse, and making a video about every episode just to tune into South Park and be reminded of the fact that everything sucks and is getting worse every single day. It's been tough. And yes, this is the segment where the dude that has a dream job complains about his life. I know how much people love to hear that. But for me, this season finale comes at a time where it feels like life kind of is returning to some kind of normal, and it feels good. So for now, that's it. I might make a video about this season as a whole, but I'm not sure yet. I'm definitely going to make at least one non-South Park video next. I'm a bit South Parked out right now. Has Been Hotels Season 2 did finish, so that might be next, but we'll see. Regardless, it'll be back to primarily South Park after that. I do have some really cool video ideas I want to start working on, so stick around for that. And thank you guys for watching my videos on this season, even if I do feel like these videos kind of suck sometimes. I definitely appreciate all of you guys and your continued support. But that's it. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays, and I will talk to you guys again very soon. Alright, so as I mentioned at the very beginning of this video, my feelings on this season are very mixed. There was so much weird stuff going on with this season. I've made videos about all the stuff they've had to deal with Paramount and streaming rights and all that kind of stuff, and the fact that the season was split into 2 separate seasons for whatever reason that we still don't really know. And not to mention the weird production cycle they had, where usually they do 1 episode a week, but this time there were like 2-week gaps and then 3-week gaps, and it was all over the place. But aside from all of that, in terms of the quality of the season itself, I thought it was good, but it definitely had a lot of issues. For one, serialization in South Park is just really hard to get right. The only season I really like that has serialized elements is season 19, and just as a general rule, I feel like South Park doesn't do a great job of making a serialized full season. Even season 19 was only partly serialized, with certain elements continuing throughout the season, and then a true serialization for like the last 3 episodes. But seasons 20 and 21, where South Park really went all in on a continuous story, are probably the worst seasons of the whole show. Now, I don't think this season was terrible by any means. I think it was a lot better than those 2 seasons, and there were many times throughout this season where it felt like there were these flashes of the golden age, where it felt like they had found whatever was lost in these last few seasons of South Park that has just made it feel not quite the same. But aside from the first episode, it never really felt like they could put those pieces together and really recapture that feeling of classic South Park. And now, obviously, the Trump stuff has been a very big point of contention for a lot of viewers, and as I've said many times, I didn't outright hate it like a lot of people did, but I do think they overdid it by a good amount. I also think there's a lot of confusion on why Matt and Trey were targeting Trump in the first place. As I theorized about the first episode of the season, and as Matt Stone would later confirm in an interview, the reason they were going after Trump is because of this air of taboo around him, where people criticizing Trump were getting taken off the air or silenced. But the problem is, I think they just got too wrapped up in this idea of Trump censoring people to the point where it just got tiresome. I mean, what else is there to say about Trump that hasn't already been said? And that's why I think it works so well in the first episode, because it's like, oh shit, they're really going after him, they don't give a fuck. But after that point, it didn't really feel like there was much else to be said about Trump, and they continued keeping up his plot for another 9 episodes. But I also don't agree with this sentiment I've been seeing that South Park is so different now and they're getting too political, because as anyone who's watched a lot of South Park can tell you, the thing they hate more than anything else is censorship. And if they perceive Donald Trump to be censoring people, of course they're going to talk about it. Like, if you look back at all of these episodes, if you really think about it, they're not politically criticizing Donald Trump all that much, aside from his attacks on freedom of speech. But even with that being the case, I think they just stretched it for far too long. Now, I am kind of making it sound like I didn't like this season, but again, there was a lot of stuff I really did like from the season. Even though I wasn't a big fan of the episode itself, I did like that they finally put Tegrity Farms to rest. I thought the plots where they focused on social commentary rather than specifically political commentary, a lot of the time ended up being the highlights of the season. Things like Saudi Arabia, 6-7, Labubu's, Peter Thiel, even the Israel stuff, even though a lot of people would argue that that is political commentary to some degree. I think all of that stuff was pretty great, and it showed that they still can do social commentary really well. And I mean, there were even aspects of the Trump plot that I enjoyed. Specifically, I was a big fan of when they made Trump more of just this wacky character that they're just making fun of rather than focusing on his political stuff. Like, my overall highlight for the entire Trump plotline, I think, was when him and JD Vance had their steamy love scene, because that was just so over the top and stupid that it was hilarious. And speaking of JD Vance, I loved his character so much. I thought he was probably the funniest character in this season. And another thing I definitely liked about the season was the fact that Matt and Trey seemed pretty self-aware about how people were feeling about it, which now that I think about it may or may not be a good thing, because they definitely knew how people felt about Tegrity Farms for a long time, and they thought it was funny that people hated it, so they just kept doing it. But with the way the season ended, I do think that we'll be moving past all of this stuff and hopefully into a much better South Park next season. So now I'm going to rank all of the episodes from this season from worst to best in my personal opinion. Alright, so in 10th place, the worst episode of the season for me was Sickofancy. Now, I didn't necessarily necessarily dislike this episode, it really just felt like kind of a filler episode. I thought the stuff with all the billionaires giving Trump gifts was just and Randy rebranding Tegrity to be an AI weed company was just decent. They included a lot of ChatGPT stuff where it felt like they wanted to say something about it, but they really didn't say much aside from the fact that it's just making everyone stupid. But it just didn't really feel like there was a lot of jokes in this episode even attempted. The definite highlight of this one was Randy doing a bunch of ketamine and eventually falling into a K-hole. That was definitely the funniest part of the episode to me, and obviously it was a good thing that they finally closed down Tegrity Farms and moved past that. But in terms of the episode as a whole, it was just So in the 9th spot, we have Twisted Christian. Now again, this episode had a lot of funny elements. I thought the 6-7 stuff was, you know, it was 6-7, so I don't know. I did really like that they introduced Peter Thiel in this episode. I thought he was a funny character. I also really liked the Exorcist parody they did with him at the end with Cartman. And I did enjoy the commentary on Christianity and this modern brand of Christianity and how much it's changed. But again, I think this episode was lacking in comedy. There were funny moments, but overall, it was one of the least funny ones from the season. In the number 8 spot, we have Walk is Dead. It's hard to go wrong with a Butters episode, and I think they did a pretty good job in this one, with all the girls in school obsessing over Labubus and Red manipulating Butters into getting her one. I also really enjoyed the underlying theme of the Labubus being demonic, and that Luke Kim was the one dealing in the Labubus at his pop-up shop, all while complaining about the tariffs. This is another one of those episodes where it kind of felt like they had a lot to say, but then it all sort of fell apart by the end. This one was, again, just pretty decent. At the number 7 spot, we have The Woman in the Hat. There were a lot of things I actually enjoyed about this episode. I love that they brought back Kyle's cousin Kyle. He played a pretty funny role in helping them build their crypto pump and dump. And of course, the meta humor of it being the South Park sucks now coin. I also enjoyed the more spooky aspects since this was a Halloween episode. Stan moving in with his grandpa at the retirement home was kind of a weird plot detail, but I guess it kind of made sense because of the ties to the economy and how terrible it is right now. But overall, just another decent episode. At number 6, we have The Crap Out. This was the season finale when they basically just said fuck it and just did whatever they wanted, and I appreciated that. I was very happy that they were more than willing to give us tons of fan service with the woodland critters. I love the ending that Stan finally got his house back, and of course the twist of the baby getting Epsteined at the end was probably one of the funniest moments from the season. And the whole point of the episode being them acknowledging the fact that this was a terrible way to end the season did make it a lot funnier, but even though it was on purpose, it was still kind of a disjointed mess, which, you know, you can only rank it so high. In the number 5 spot, we have Got a Nut. I thought it was funny having Mr. Mackey work for ICE after the school implements their new Jesus first way of thinking, and the social commentary being made with ICE raiding heaven was probably one of the stronger ones of the season. I also loved the bit of Kristi Noem just shooting any dog that she sees, which they also called back to at the end of the season. All of the Charlie Kirk debate bro stuff was pretty entertaining. In hindsight, I kind of feel like they almost went a little too easy on that genre of content, but the general commentary on these grifters and how everyone kind of sounds like Cartman now just to get attention was pretty funny, and I definitely appreciated it. The weakest part of this episode was definitely the ending. It kind of felt like they should have been its own episode entirely where they go to Mar-a-Lago, but it just ends so abruptly and then they start doing like a Charlie Brown reference. I don't know. It was really weird, but it was still kind of funny. At number 4, we have Conflict of Interest. Definitely one of the stronger episodes of the season. I love the commentary on prediction markets and the corruption that's been blatant with all that kind of stuff. I also really liked Brendan Card's Looney Tunes scenes where he would just get completely annihilated by Trump over and over again. Again, this was some of the stronger commentary from the season about freedom of speech and how the FCC is censoring people. And all the Israel stuff was pretty hilarious too, having Sheila go over there to give Netanyahu a stern talking to. It was really absurd, and I definitely appreciated it. This one was definitely a solid episode. At number 3, we have Turkey Trot. I really enjoyed this one, mainly because it focused mostly on social commentary rather than political commentary. I thought the Saudi Arabia stuff was hilarious. It felt very classic South Park with the fake ads and all that kind of stuff. Again, I didn't really know much about Pete Hegseth prior to this episode, but I did think it was funny how they just made him look like a total doofus the entire time. This was also the closest thing we had to a normal episode following the boys out of anything this season, which to be fair, it still wasn't really that, but it was close enough, and I definitely enjoyed that. Overall, another very solid episode. At our runner-up spot, and this was kind of a tough decision, but I went with Sora Not Sorry. I think what made this episode so great is that it probably had the least political commentary out of any of the episodes this season, focusing way more on AI videos and how crazy that's getting. I really enjoyed the Studio Ghibli references, and the AI-generated Cartman videos were pretty hilarious, but the definite highlight of this episode was the Vance and Trump romance subplot. As I mentioned, I feel like this is the best way that they could make fun of of Trump and Vance without actually making fun of their politics. Just making them have graphic sex is pretty hilarious. There was also a lot of meta commentary throughout this episode about AI and how you can use it to make people do stuff they would never do while they're doing exactly that. I thought it was pretty hilarious. And of course, you can never go wrong having Detective Harris in an episode. He's always very funny. Overall, this episode was great. And in the number 1 spot, we have Sermon on the Mount. This is the episode that kicked off the season, and honestly, this was a pretty hard decision because I was trying to weigh the quality of the episode versus the context of it. Because in terms of the quality of this episode itself, just completely removed from any context, it would still be a really solid episode. I just don't know if I would put it nearly this high. But it was really hard for me to overlook the context of everything going on with South Park and Donald Trump and Paramount and the huge mess that was. Not to mention the streaming deals finally being negotiated days before this episode and Stephen Colbert's show getting shut down. With the context of all of that, this was one of the most insane things that South Park has ever done. And because of that, it's really hard for me to not put it at number 1. So again, if it was just the episode itself, it'd probably be like a B tier episode. But with all that context, this is absolute S tier, one of the best episodes they've ever made. So yeah, that's my ranking list. I'm sure you guys completely disagree with it, as you usually do, so feel free to let me know what your list is in the comments, and that's it. I'll see you guys again pretty soon.